Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Willmar City Council meeting for Tuesday, September 4th, 2007. Roll call.
Mayor Heitke.
Here.
Councilmember Reese.
Here.
Christensen.
Here.
Anderson.
Here.
Swenson.
Here.
Gardner.
Here.
Dockin.
Here.
Fagerly.
Here.
DeBleek.
Here.
9 present, 0 absent.
Thanks, Kevin. It's our practice to begin the meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the City Council meeting for tonight. Our council chambers are almost filled, and that's always good to see. We have citizens here for various reasons and purposes, and you are certainly all welcome. Tonight, after we go through the consent agenda, we are going to recognize a couple of retiring city employees. We have a public hearing scheduled for 7:03, which will be probably closer to about 7:15. And then we have a presentation from the Coalition of Greater Minnesota Cities, which is one of the state organizations that Willmar belongs to. And then we'll go on with committee reports. So at this point, I'd like to ask our city council members if there's any additions or deletions or changes to the agenda. Mr. Schmidt has a couple. Go ahead, Mick.
Mr. Mayor, we'd like to add 2 items under miscellany. One is to set the public hearing dates for the city budget, December 3rd, and then a continuation hearing, if necessary, would take place on December 17th. And then this afternoon, we opened some bids for the Civic Center Trail Improvement project that we would like to make some recommendations on. And then if you would, Mr. Mayor, consider the possibility of moving item number 13 up prior to the committee reports in
Sure.
order to accommodate some travelers to the city tonight.
Sure. All right. Anything else from the council members? If not, then we'll move to the consent agenda.
Move to approve.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda. This includes the City Council minutes of August 20th, the Hospital Board minutes of August 15th, the Utilities Commission minutes of August 27th, the Planning Commission minutes of August 22nd, the Candioi Area Transit Operations Board minutes of June 26th, the Police Commission of July 16th, the Convention and Visitors Bureau of July 17th, and the Mayor's Housing Task Force of August 27th. Do any council members wish to discuss any items here? I have 2 items I'd like to get some clarification on. One is in the Planning Commission and one is in the Housing Task Force. With the exception of those 2 committee minute reports, there's a motion to approve the rest of the consent agenda. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries. Under the Planning Commission minutes, I had a question about this proposed, what's it called here? Senior Living Facility Conditional Use Permit. And I understand it's been tabled for more discussion, but I just want to make sure the question was asked about the length of this building, and the gentleman who proposed this said that it is proposed to be 480 feet long. That's nearly 2 football fields. Is that correct? Is that the proper length of this building?
I read that as well, Mr. Mayor. I can't answer your question.
I'm getting a nod from our city finance
Steve
director.
was there. Maybe he knows.
Steve, is this correct? 480 feet. That's almost 2 football fields long. How big of a building is this? We don't have anything like that in the city. This is going back to the Planning Commission for more study. Is that correct?
That's correct.
All right. That seems unusually long. And that would be, they're proposing it for the north side, so I hope the council members on the north side are fully aware of this and Maybe you can be attending that. All right, would somebody like to propose accepting those minutes?
Move to approve. Second.
There's a motion and a second to approve the Planning Commission report of August 22nd. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That carries. And under the Housing Commission, or the Housing Task Force, under number 6, there was a discussion about chain-link fences not being allowed in the front yard of residential lots. What is the city's current ruling on fences in the front yard of lots? Aren't they supposed to be set back from sidewalks to begin with? Can anybody answer that one?
I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor, I can't. When I excused Mr. Peterson from the meeting tonight, he said there wouldn't be any questions that he could think of that might come up.
He didn't talk to me about that.
I would have to, I'll have to find out and get back to you.
Well, I recall, we've got some houses on Willmar Avenue West that have stone walls right up to the sidewalk, and I think those were put in place before the city studied that. And my understanding is that the city then put in an ordinance that you have to set back any front lawn walls, fences, gates, whatever, that they can't come right up to the sidewalk. So I would think that would apply to wire fences and chain link fences also. So perhaps that can be passed back to Mr. Peterson. Thank you. Would somebody like to approve those minutes?
Move to approve. Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve those Housing Task Force minutes. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That carries. Thank you. Now we have a couple of employees we want to recognize. The first one isn't here tonight. The rascal got away on us. But anyway, Tom O'Malley. Tom is one of those fellows in City Hall that works very quietly in the engineering department. He probably knows every single foot of piping and curb and gutter and roadway throughout the city. He probably planned most of them. And he's decided it's time for himself to retire. He cannot be here tonight. He's got other involvements tonight, but we don't want to miss the opportunity to say a couple words about him. Tom O'Malley graduated from Dunwoody Institute of Minneapolis in 1972. He worked 7 years for Noise Engineering in Willmar and 2 years with Quam Construction before he contracted privately with the city of Willmar for 5 years. In July of 1985, Tom was then hired by the city of Willmar Engineering Department, and he's been a loyal and dedicated employee for the past 22 years. His duties have included designing, drafting, and estimating for street reconstruction and new development within the city. He's also responsible for overseeing of construction. And I would also add to that, he's frequently out inspecting projects as they're in the process of being constructed. Away from work, Tom enjoys life living on Green Lake. His hobbies include fishing, hunting, golfing, and gardening. Tom will be missed by his coworkers as well as the many contractors he has worked with throughout the years. Tom was a very dedicated employee, unassuming, and always in the front offices, usually early, having a look at maps and a cup of coffee or something before he headed out for the day. But Tom was a very, very dedicated employee, and the city of Willmar is certainly appreciative of his fine work, and we wish him the very best in his retirement. So our congratulations to Tom O'Malley. There will be a reception for him coming up soon, Mick?
Thursday afternoon
Thursday afternoon at City Hall in the afternoon?
at the fire station,
Oh, at the fire station. At about what time, Mick?
2 o'clock.
2 o'clock. Okay. Thursday afternoon, 2 o'clock at the fire station, a reception for Tom O'Malley. Mel, have you had a chance to look for a replacement for him yet, or is it? Mel's our city engineer.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, yes, we did indeed have. We moved somebody up within the department. Lyndon Whitman has been selected to replace this position.
Curley?
Yep.
Good. Okay. Thanks. The next employee is another one of these dedicated fellows who doesn't say a lot. He just does a good job, and he's done a wonderful job over the years. He's one of our police officers. His name is Terry Elbers. And Terry, when I'm done saying, if you want to say a few words, you're welcome to come up and say a few words at the microphone. So you don't have to, but if you want to, you can. Terry Elbers has been with the city a long time as in the police department. I first met Terry shortly after I came to town. He probably doesn't remember this, but I did. It was in a positive way. But I met him as a patrolman, and I went on a few ride-alongs with him, and I've got a story about one of those ride-alongs I want to share with you. Terry Elbers became a police officer for the city of Willmar on March 16th, 1979. He retired from the police department on August 25th, 2007, after 28-plus years of service to the citizens of Willmar. Terry's a St. Cloud native and received his law enforcement degree from Alexandria Technical College in 1977. Well, just yesterday, you know, I mean, the time has flown. He started his law enforcement career in the city of Tracy, working there as a police officer for nearly 2 years prior to coming to work for the Willmar Police Department. I just drove back from Tracy. It's still down there, you know, in that little community down there. Terry was a patrol officer for 17 years, where he was also the department's trained accident reconstruction specialist and an original member of the department's emergency response team. In 1996, Terry was assigned to the detective division, where he has worked until his retirement. He's had a leadership role in many high-profile cases here in the city of Willmar. Officer Elbers has received numerous letters of recognition and commendation during his tenure at the Willmar Police Department. And I think the citizens will remember this. Included is a life-saving award from the department and recognition from the City Council for his role in saving a young child from a burning house in March of 2000. And I recall that very specifically. Terry and two other officers jumped into a burning house to bring out a little girl. Terry is married. His wife, Michelle, is she here? Yes. Okay, she's hiding back there. And his 3 grown children, Justin, Tricia, and Megan, are his pride and joy. Terry will be missed, and we hope he enjoys his retirement. Now, the story I have to tell you about Terry, and he may not remember this, but it was in the 90s, and he was a patrolman yet, and I was on a ride-along on a Saturday night, and we were somewhere up by the big bridge over the railroad tracks on 1st Street, and a call came in over the radio that some guy had eloped from the detox center or the crisis center, one of the two over there on Willmar Avenue. And Terry said, you know, he called back to dispatch and said he'd respond to the call. So I expected him to turn on the lights and go, you know, racing down 1st Street and up Willmar Avenue to the east and, you know, pull in and pull the whole act together, but he didn't. He drove very quickly but quietly down 1st Street and then cut through the neighborhood. And then he pulls to a stop in the parking lot behind Calvary Lutheran Church. And he shuts all the lights off. And I'm sitting in the front seat, and he's sitting there in the front seat. I said, well, Terry, the detox center is, you know, 2 blocks away. He said, we're just going to wait. He said, if we get lucky tonight, that joker is going to run right into us. And so we sat there for about half a minute. It wasn't very long. And sure enough, here comes the guy loping across the athletic field at the junior high school, and he runs right up to the police car. Right up to the police car. And Terry steps out and introduces himself. And the guy was certainly surprised. And but I thought to myself, now there's a smart cop. He anticipated what was going to happen, and he waited for it to happen. And, you know, I've used this analogy many times in the city of Willmar about the great hockey player. You know, everybody plays hockey, and they pass the puck around. But the great hockey player is the one that goes to where the puck's going to be. And then that makes him a much better hockey player. That's what Terry did that night. He waited because he figured this guy is going to come, could come across this direction from the detox center, and he ran right up to the car. And I thought, now that's a smart street cop, and I'm glad he's on our side. I don't know if you remember that story, Terry, but I do.
I remember you riding.
Yeah. But the guy came right across the parking lot, right up to the front of the car. I couldn't believe it.
He sat and waited for the hockey puck?
He waited for the Joker and then gave him an escort back to detox. Anyway, I think that just kind of typifies the kind of work that Terry has been involved in. Smart cop, quiet, gets the job done, and a long term of service, 28 years of service to this city. That's an outstanding contribution to the public safety and welfare of all of our citizens and businesses. So tonight, we want to certainly recognize Terry and salute him and thank his family for sharing him with our city over all these years. It's been a very good commitment to our community, and we are very appreciative of it. Terry, we have a small gift here we want to give you, and if you wouldn't mind, do you want to say a couple words before we give you the gift? You can get it either way. But
Just want to say thank you, Mayor Heike and council members for everything. I mean, it's been a great career, and I want to thank the people I've worked with over the years.
yeah,
I've learned everything from all the people, going back to Nick Curtis and all those guys I worked
Yeah.
with. So,
yeah.
I mean, how can you go wrong? So, it was a great career, and thank my wife and family for all the nights and weekends that we missed and the holidays, and I'm glad to be retired now. So.
Yep, I bet you are. Any thoughts about retirement yet, or is it still open?
Well, I'm busy, keeping busy, so.
Good.
Yeah.
Okay, you're not moving out of the area
No,
immediately or anything?
No, nothing like that.
Okay.
I'll be around.
Would your wife stand up and your kids, are they here? Or?
Just my wife, Michelle.
Michelle, could you stand up? Let's give them both a big round of applause. Come on up, Terry. Thank you for all your work and all your service. Thank you very much. Fellas, you guys.
Thanks, Terry. Congratulations, Terry.
Congratulations and thanks.
Thank you, Terry.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
A lot of fun, Terry.
Good luck, Terry. 15 bucks.
Now, the best gift is that if you and your wife want to leave early tonight, that's okay. But thanks, many thanks. All right, now we are up to our scheduled public hearing, and I will officially open this hearing at this time. This has to do with, it's called Special Assessments for Unpaid Weed and Grass Mowing. Now, this is a big topic here in Willmar, so Kevin, can you explain what this is all about?
Mayor Heike, members of the council, general public. Over the course of the summer, the city responds to numerous complaints regarding the lack of mowing on various properties. Pursuant to our ordinance, we send out notices, and if there's no response, the city makes arrangements through an agent to have the property mowed. The city takes that cost, adds a charge for the administration of $35, and sends the bills out probably for about 90 days before it's turned over to the attorney, city attorney. You have before you a list of those properties, parcel numbers and addresses and amounts that have not been paid from August 1st, 2006 through July 31, 2007 timeframe. Tonight's hearing is an opportunity for those owners to submit testimony on why, or mainly why not, they should not pay this. Then the council has the full prerogative to certify for collection or dismiss the charge pursuant to the testimony.
All right, thank you, Kevin. I want to point out that there are 14 different properties that are noted here, and the total amount is roughly in the amount of about $1,500 if you added all the properties together. Is there anybody in the audience that wishes to say something or ask something about this list of property owners whose yard work was not kept up to snuff? Anybody want to say anything? Ask anything?
You can. Yeah, that's your time. Raise your hand.
Did somebody want to say something?
Some here.
Okay, would you come up to the microphone and introduce yourself and give us your name and address, and then tell us what's on your mind.
Hi,
Hi.
my name is Jordan Martinez, and this is my husband Randy Martinez.
Okay.
And we live at 2221 22nd Street, Southwest Willmar.
Okay, go ahead.
And we got the notice from the post office that we had to go to get an envelope. So then we went and got the envelope, and it gave us 5 days to mow our property. So we got arrangements with my dad to bring his mower over and mow it, and they mowed it the next afternoon. And we were gonna mow it, and then when they mowed it, they moved our sump pump, and they didn't put it back. And then when it rained, it soaked our whole basement up, because our sump pump the hose was supposed to be out towards cornfield, and they didn't put it back after they mowed. So then we got damages in our basement, which grew mold, and we had to rip our carpet out and our molding, and we had to throw a lot of our kids' toys away because that's dangerous mold. And that's all I gotta say.
Okay. Randy, did you want to say something?
No, I'm fine.
And we even got pictures, so we're not lying. So.
Well, I believe that, so. All right, just hold on a second. Council members, does anybody want to ask something or say something here? Councilmember Dockin?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, go ahead.
So who did the mowing and who caused the sump? You said the sump did?
We don't know the people who mowed. It was the city of Willmar who just
One of
came
your
and mowed it.
employees.
It's someone that we sent out to do the mowing that
Yeah.
that is responsible for the damage? Is that what you're alleging?
Well, they didn't put the sump pump hose back after they mowed it.
They threw
Okay.
it into the egret window of our basement. And they failed to
Put
bring it back up.
Well, that doesn't sound like a really good thing to happen. I'd like to ask the city attorney, do they have a cause to come back to the city because the firm that the city sent out caused damage to their property, and do they have that recourse?
I would say they have that recourse.
Okay. Have you pursued that? Did you know that you had a recourse against the city?
What's that?
Okay.
Do you mean complaint?
Yeah, right. I mean, we sent someone out, and they did something to your property that caused damage, and so someone has to be responsible.
Yeah. But do you mean, did we follow up and contact the city?
Yeah, maybe you could contact our city attorney, Mr. Ronning.
City Clerk's office.
Pardon me?
Better. Clerk's office.
Oh, city clerk's office, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Mr. Halliday, okay?
Anyway, Councilmember Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a question in that regard. We hired a subcontractor, or was it a city employee that did this? Do we know?
All weed mowing in the last 2-3 years has been done by agents, so we don't send most of our mowing. So this is a private individual,
So it's a
not
private
really a private
individual
company.
I mean, I'm just trying to establish where the liability lies here, and it seems as if it might be to the individual that did the mowing as opposed to the city.
Somebody's responsible.
Somebody screwed up. And, yeah, the advice to see the city clerk is probably good advice.
Okay.
Two separate issues, though.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, Mayor Cotton, okay.
Councilmember DeBleek?
Yeah, Randy, you had said that, or mentioned that you only had the letter in your possession that was sent out, giving you notice that your yard was going to be mowed. You only had that for like a day? Was
Yeah,
that?
we only got that letter for like a day.
Sir?
Not even a whole day.
Was that not sent timely, or what was it, did it remain at the
Never
post
received
office for a long
the letter
time?
at our
or-
house. We had to go pick it up at the post office.
Yeah.
And then we picked it up, and then it said, you have 5 days to mow your backyard. So then I got arrangements right away to mow it, and then they came the following day to mow it.
Kevin, can I ask Kevin a question? Kevin, is that usually the standard? How much time is there given from the time the letter is sent until actually someone's sent out to perform the mowing?
Well, normally it'll talk about a date that it has to be done. There are some that never get picked up. So there's always that small opportunity with no notice going out, and then we do dispatch someone. So, you know, if they're doing this within a 4 or 5 day period, the post office probably keeps them for 10 days. In this case, it went out 7/6, and the date of delivery was 7/13. So there's 7 days lost right there.
From the time the card was sent from the post office until it was picked up, or?
Correct.
Okay.
That gap was right there, yep. What else can we? And the mowing was done on 7/14.
Yeah, and we picked it up at 7:13.
But they had tried to deliver it before that, and nobody was home to sign for it? Is that?
Yeah, no one was home at that time.
So then they left a note saying you had to go to the post office to
Yeah.
pick it up. And you picked it up on the 13th, and the service was there on the 14th.
Yes, sir.
But in that letter, it said 5 days or someone else is gonna mow it.
Yep.
Or else.
Councilmember Christensen?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I suspect maybe the letter was postmarked 5 or 6 days prior to that. We don't know that. Did you say when it was sent, Kevin?
He said when it was sent.
No, it's all certified mail. It's sent out 7/6, July. You're hereby given notice that the property located at X should be mowed and trimmed. If this is not done within 5 days after your receipt of this letter, or 7 days from the date of this letter, the city goes and has it mowed. So it's already in violation of the ordinance when the letter goes out. It's in excess of 7 inches, then a public works staff looks at it. They come back and tell us, yes, it's in violation of the ordinance, and then the letter goes out. So you're probably looking at, who knows, 10 inches by that time. So those two options are done.
So it was mowed 7 days after the letter was sent out, evidently, because they didn't receive it after 5 days. It says 5 days or 7 days after the letter.
On the 8th day. On the 8th day, it's mowed.
Okay. I noticed in here it says that the council should consider their objections and take appropriate action. What's appropriate action? Dismissing the fee?
That's an option. Really, I guess there's two. We can't really argue the cost, because the cost is the agent, and then the ordinance requires the $35. So your options are to certify it or dismiss it.
If we dismiss it, we pick up the tab, basically, the city does?
Of just the agents.
Okay. So it'll still cost them $35?
No. You dismiss it all for them.
Okay.
We're not out $35. It's staff time that the ordinance allows us to collect for.
Due to the circumstances, I guess I'll make a motion that we dismiss that fee for of $74.90 and let them go.
Second. We can't make a motion yet. We're still in the public hearing portion of the meeting.
You're right.
So we got to wait until we close the public hearing.
I'll take back that motion.
Okay, just hold on that, Ron. Usually the city, is responding to complaints. They're not out hunting down, yards with long grass. They're responding to complaints. Had you let your lawn go for quite a while?
Yeah, we weren't home for a couple of days.
Well, it
Well,
must...
no, see, we have to rent, we have to have my dad bring his tractor, and we pay him, because it's not grass, it's not finished lawn in the back when we bought the house.
Yeah.
So it grows faster than the front lawn, so we have him come over like every 2 weeks to do it.
Okay.
And
this would have been a time when the grass was growing very fast, and
Yes, sir.
so is it possible the lawn got extended without being mowed every 2 weeks or something?
yeah, well, there's different levels of that grass.
Okay, all right. Because, the city doesn't respond unless there's been a complaint about somebody's yard.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, we understand what you've said, and just hold on. You can sit down, and council will make some action here in a few minutes.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else in the audience that wishes to say something or ask something about this list of assessments on these weed problems? Okay, if not, if nobody else wants to say anything, we'll close the public hearing. Now the action comes back to the city council table. Councilmember Christensen?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Before I make my motion, I believe the Housing Task Force is considering these items also. And I had made a suggestion quite a while ago that we have a handout for new homeowners in town, people moving to Willmar, of what we expect of a new homeowner. I don't know where that's gone, but has it been discussed at the task force?
Yes, it's been discussed a lot.
I suspect that's something that should be done, and the sooner the better. It'd be best, even with winter coming now and shoveling, who's responsible for the sidewalks and et cetera. But I'm assuming you're continuing to mow the grass and keeping it low. Yeah. I mean, it's kind of expected, and we only respond to complaints. With that, I would make a motion that we remove that fee from them.
Second. We have a motion and a second to delete the fee for Randy and Jordan Martinez in the amount of $74.90. Any other comment or discussion about that? Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. That motion carries. The rest of the list, we would need another motion if somebody wishes to make
Resolution for certifying on taxes.
that. All right.
I'd introduce the resolution, Mr. Mayor.
Second. We have a motion and a second for a resolution that certifies the remaining list here of 13 properties for assessment, and that will be placed on their individual property tax roll. Further comment about that? Roll call.
Councilmember Reese.
Aye.
Christensen.
Aye.
Anderson.
Aye.
Swenson.
Aye.
Gardner.
Aye.
Dockin.
Aye.
Fagerly.
Aye.
DeBleek.
Aye.
8 ayes, 0 nays.
That resolution passes. All right, we are now down to number 9 on the agenda, which is a presentation from the Coalition of Greater Minnesota Cities, Flaherty and Hood. And tonight we have with us Holly Barron and Joe Sullivan. And welcome to the council meeting, and tell us what's on your mind.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, council members. And I know you have a full agenda, so we really appreciate you welcoming us to your council. And we thank the City of Willmar for your membership. For any members who don't know, the Coalition of Greater Minnesota Cities is an advocacy organization of 68 cities that work at the state legislature for specific areas in policy that affect Greater Minnesota. I'm Holly, like you said, and I work primarily on transportation, so I can give you a pretty good account of what happened there. Joe works on environment, and we'll also be covering local government aid and the property tax bill this session. Looking forward to possible special session. I'll talk a little bit about that, and also just briefly on annexation. So I've handed out packets that you can kind of follow along. On the inside page, this is kind of our final report, and on the inside page you have a 2007 CGMC positions and legislative outcomes. Kind of tells you where our organization is at and took policies at the beginning of 2007 and what happened. So I am going to start with property tax relief and local government aid, which is a major initiative of the coalition. With a new DFL party in power in 2007, property tax relief was a high priority. It really wasn't going to be if there was going to be property tax relief, but really how much. Many of you probably already know that Governor Pawlenty is not a fan of local government aid, and even he had included $10 million in local government aid in his proposal. The CGMC kind of took a position of comprehensive property tax relief, and you can see on the left there that would be money into the local government aid program, money back to schools, and also to the counties. And then we also had some formula changes that benefited Greater Minnesota cities. The House came together with a proposal. It was a little bit smaller. It had an initial $60 million in local government aid. The importance there being is the House basically modeled what the CGMC had put together as a good comprehensive property tax relief plan in the beginning of session. The Senate went a little bit larger. Senator Bach is the chair of the tax committee in the Senate, and he had included $150 million in local government aid. Unfortunately, because they had to take out most of the revenue in the bill, because Governor Pawlenty had already vetoed a previous bill, the final property tax relief bill was a little bit smaller. And on the right, the legislative outcome, the final package did include $70 million in local government aid, $13 million to the counties, $5 to the townships, one formula change, and that was removal of the taconite aid offsets, and also the creation of a local government aid study group. That is important to note because, as many of you probably know, the metro cities would like to see the amount of cities that receive local government aid in the metro area to expand. Their proposal created a separate pot that would have reduced how much local government aid Greater Minnesota cities receive and put it into a separate pot for the metro cities. We were able to thwart that effort at the end of session. However, I think the chairs decided that it would be best to put together a study group where the city interest groups could get together and discuss any formula changes that were to be made and agreed upon. I should mention that we do have a an expert policy analyst on our staff who is a resource to all of you. The LGA process can be very complicated. The formula can be very complicated, and he will be participating in this local government aid study group. Finally, just to wrap up local government aid, as many of you know, the bill was vetoed. Governor Pawlenty disagreed with a budget forecast provision that the state should account for inflation in their costs. So while CGMC supports that provision, we were very disappointed to see the final bill vetoed, which would have had $70 million for the local government aid program. And if you flip over, our policy analyst prepared a graph for the city of Willmar as how they would have fared under each of the proposals. As of right now, with no law change, with no proposal passing, there would have been a decrease in local government aid, same with passage of the governor's proposal. And then you would have fared very well under the Senate proposal and also the CGMC's proposal. The veto did cost the city of Willmar what would have been an additional $568,000 in local government aid. And the graph below just shows how historically Willmar is faring as compared to inflation. And that dip from 2007 to 2008, and our policy analyst had just said the city is comparatively experiencing a little bit more growth in comparison to other state cities. So I should mention that this is, you can interrupt me and ask me any questions along the way. Are there any questions about local government aid, property tax relief? I think now is a good time to kind of discuss special session. I'm sure a lot of you have heard about possibilities of a special session. I just received a letter dated September 4th from the DFL leadership, Senator Larry Poggemiller and Margaret Anderson Kelleher, stating that they would like to see a special session that addresses disaster relief, being the floods in southeast Minnesota and the I-35W bridge collapse. It doesn't look very hopeful from the letter, and you can take it for its worth that they will address other issues such as a property tax relief bill, a comprehensive transportation bill, and a bonding bill. So if there's any questions about anything as far as property tax relief, local government aid, special session, I can take them now or I can move on.
Just hold a second. Does anybody wish to ask her any questions here? Just a couple questions on local government aid. Go back over what you said in the beginning of your presentation about the metro area is now talking louder about local government aid for like the suburb, or
Right.
is it Minneapolis and St. Paul, or?
Well, Minneapolis and St. Paul already get local government aid, but as you probably have heard, Mayor Coleman in St. Paul is experiencing a major budget deficit, so they would like to receive more local government aid, as would the city of Minneapolis. But they already receive local government aid. I think the metro cities, which is another city lobbying group, would like to expand the number of suburban cities that do receive local government aid, in which case creating a separate metro pot, which would then decrease how much Greater Minnesota cities receive, as opposed to what we would feel is if you're going to expand the pot and include more cities in the local government aid program, everybody should be decreased proportionately, not taking from one regional area and putting it into a separate pot. And we just disagree with a separate pot in general. is you create a problem where then you have cities lobbying for more money into one separate pot as opposed to the whole program. So we see that problem not going away, and that's going to be our focus next year.
You know, that's an interesting argument because it's not apples and apples. You know, the metro cities have a much higher property tax base, plus they don't have some of the expenses that outstate cities have to shoulder, such as airports, libraries, even waste treatment, because they have the Metropolitan Council, which gets a huge allocation from the state legislature already that everybody is paying into, and yet it only goes to the Metropolitan Council. They don't have private, or they don't have city-owned airports. They have regional airports. They, even their library system is not city-owned, and now it's county-owned. And, you know, they're arguing that they're in the same predicament that outstate cities are, and they're not at all.
Exactly.
But yet, you know, they're arguing that they should get the same thing that outstate cities get. It seems like, you know, Greater Minnesota continues to pay larger expenses and more services than the metro cities do, and they have a larger property tax base to begin with.
Sure. And we send out materials all the time if you have to address these issues at the legislature with your own legislators or at the public, and the property tax issue is the main basis of that argument, and, you know, why we should continue to be in good discussions with the metro cities. So, like I said, Steve, our analyst, is very good, and he attends all the meetings that have anything to do with changing the formula or adding, decreasing funding.
Before you leave tonight, you don't have to answer it this minute, but I'd like you, if you wish to, I'd like you to give me an opinion on how you think our legislators are doing down there. You know, Representative Junkie and Senator Gimsey. What are they doing down there to help, you know, with these issues?
Sure.
I'm a little bit concerned about, you know, what's going on there.
I can definitely give you my impression.
Joe, you want to come up next?
Do you want to?
Or anybody else have a question for Holly before she steps away?
I'll come back, though, too.
All right.
I'm gonna step aside. Joe is going to talk about our environmental program briefly. I'll go back to transportation, a little bit in annexation, and then if you have any other questions, otherwise we'll be finished. And I talked with Mr. Schmidt as well, and I thought that because your city also has a local option sales tax, that I should mention this bit of information as well. I don't know if many of you know that the tax chairs in the House and the Senate are not fans, policy basis-wise, of local option sales taxes. And also in that the veto tax bill was a moratorium on all local option sales taxes for 3 years. So I think yours is extended at least another 5 years if you wanted to come back and change it, you know, your uses or extend it. The House tax chair is on record saying she will not even hear a bill regarding local option sales taxes in the future. So just kind of a tidbit of something else that maybe you can discuss with your legislators as well.
So it could be extended, you're saying?
Well, I'm just letting you know that the political environment right now for doing anything with local option sales taxes is not good.
But our legislation says it's going to sunset. So could it be extended, Mick?
Well, I think what Holly is telling us is that now is not a good time to try to get an extension or for a community to seek a local option sales tax. Maybe towards the end of our program, that environment might change down there. They'll be a little more receptive, but just kind of depends who's in the governor's office and who's heading up the House and the Senate.
All right.
I wish to say nothing is impossible, but just that we'd give you the information. Okay, Joe.
Hi, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. My name is Joe Sullivan. I'm an attorney and a lobbyist for the CGMC. I'm actually the lead lobbyist on the CGMC's environment program. And this past session, the CGMC had two priorities for our environment program. The first was to ensure that the Pollution Control Agency continues to set phosphorus standards on a case-by-case approach, meaning that when they look at a particular water body, that a wastewater treatment facility, a new or an expanding facility, when they look at that discharge, that they actually do an individualized analysis of the water body to make sure that they're setting the appropriate phosphorus standard if they need to set an appropriate phosphorus standard. And the CGMC this year has opposed the Pollution Control Agency is planning on adopting a new rule that basically allows them just to set an arbitrary statewide phosphorus standard for all new or expanding wastewater treatment facilities. CGMC is opposed to that for basically one reason, because phosphorus treatment it's very expensive, and in many cases it's unnecessary. In some cases it's totally unnecessary. So we don't want basically communities to be wasting their finite resources when they're not going to receive any benefit, any water quality benefit. The CGMC was successful in delaying the Pollution Control Agency's new rule for until May 1st of 2008, and we're currently looking at what our approach will be for the 2008 session, including a legal option, possibly suing the agency. The second major, just also to give you a scope for the phosphorus issue, why it's a big deal, is that the agency is estimating that the implementation of their new rule could cost 35 communities. They project that there will be 35 communities that will be impacted by their new rule in the next 5 years. And they're projecting that it could cost $134 million for those 35 communities. Now, I know that in Willmar, you're building a new facility, and that new facility is going to be in compliance with the new phosphorus rule. It'll meet a 1 milligram per liter standard. But my understanding is that millions of those dollars that in construction costs are going towards environmental mandates. That gives you an idea of how expensive these mandates are. It gives you an expense, and in some cases they're absolutely necessary. But when they're not necessary, we shouldn't just let the agency's expedience, dictate where local resources are going, and that's what we feel is happening here. The agency also, just interestingly, admits that their new phosphorus rule will have intangible benefits. You can put this in quotes. They've got intangible benefits, and that the impact will be likely unnoticed by most Minnesotans. So when you're looking at something that costs $134 million, it'd be nice if it were noticed. But the other issue that the CGMC dealt with this year was ensuring that the other environmental issue that the CGMC dealt with this year was ensuring that cities, before one of these they're called total maximum daily load cleanup plans, before TMDL is in place, that the city has the opportunity to still grow, and that economic development shouldn't be held hostage because you're sitting on an impaired water body. And what the CGMC fought for in 2006 was what's called the offsetting authority, and this allows the city to still grow while ensuring that the water body that they're sitting on is continuing to actually get better water quality. So it's kind of the best of both worlds, basically. And the CGMC was successful in fending off several attacks on that offsetting authority that was put into law during the 2006. And ultimately, the CGMC our position on offsetting was ultimately upheld by the Minnesota Supreme Court in a very important case called the Annandale Maple Lake case. I don't know if any of you have heard about that, but that was basically the position the court upheld was CGMC's position on offsetting. So if there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. I know that wastewater treatment is something you guys are dealing with now, and I know you guys have a very big new plant going up. So.
All right, Councilmember Christensen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Joe, has the PCA ever been sued and lost?
The PCA has been sued and lost.
They have?
Yeah, they have.
So you're not just paddling up a river then?
No, I mean, as a matter of fact, I'm very confident in our lawsuit and the potential that we have. I think that it's very clear that the PCA's phosphorus rule, as it currently stands, they might make corrections that we would be happy with, but as it currently stands, I think that the PCA's phosphorus rule violates federal law. And federal law basically says that an environmental mandate must be necessary I mean, it can't be more necessary or less necessary. It has to fit right in a zone. And the PCA's new phosphorus rule doesn't fit within that zone. It just misses the mark.
Okay.
It's arbitrary, basically.
Thank you.
Councilmember Dockett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for your report. You mentioned mandates that aren't necessary. What mandates are you talking about, and does it have an implication for our new wastewater treatment plant? And are we going to be paying for those mandates? Is that what you're saying?
I don't think that the city of Willmar will actually, as far as the phosphorus rule is concerned, because you guys are building your new facility that would meet the phosphorus rule's requirements. The phosphorus rule is not going to have an impact on your new facility. But as far as, I think that the issue for the city is that it's one of precedence. I mean, if the MPCA does this now, they'll continue to do it, and they'll continue with other environmental mandates. If they can shove what we believe is an arbitrary mandate, down cities' throats, if they get away with it once, they're going to try it again. Because at the end of the day, it really is. It's easier for them to regulate, and they would like that to be like to have an easier time regulating the community, and I think that, so it's an issue of precedence for the city of Willmar, really.
Are you talking strictly about phosphorus then? When you said mandates that aren't necessary?
Well, as far as, I think that there are many phosphorus mandates that are necessary. So let me just, phosphorus can be a significant problem. But in certain circumstances, when phosphorus is shown that it has no impact on water quality, that you can be running at 2.5 milligrams per liter, you can be running at 3 milligrams per liter, and that has no impact on water quality, then in those situations, the levying of a mandate is unnecessary, and that's our concern. That's our problem. It's in a limited situation, a limited kind of category of facilities. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think so. Thank you.
Councilmember DeBleek.
Yeah, Joe, a little bit more on the phosphorus rule. You said that you think that's too restrictive, the 1 part per milliliter, the current requirement from the MPCA. You thinking, or your stance is that should be higher than that, or shouldn't we be doing anything with phosphorus at all? What is your position on that exactly?
Yeah, my position is not that Pollution Control Agency's new phosphorus rule is more or less restrictive. My position is that it's arbitrary, that there is no magic to the MPCA's new phosphorus rule. The new phosphorus rule says that if you're a new or expanding facility, you have to be at a 1 milligram per liter standard. And they say that statewide. Well, there is no magic to a 1 milligram per liter standard. It's just kind of out there floating. What I want, and what the CGMC, more importantly, what the CGMC wants, is the CGMC wants the MPCA to come in and say, this is what the phosphorus limit should be, not just kind of by fiat saying, this is what you get.
Yeah, because I know the phosphorus is very expensive to remove, and it's a major cost of the new plant that we're building. So
yeah, and exactly. And I mean, I think a great example is the city of Moorhead. If Moorhead gets, and Moorhead is actually kind of, they will get this new, they'll get hit with this new, the new phosphorus rule, and they're looking at possibly a $4 million upgrade in their wastewater treatment facility, and then about $300,000 a year in maintenance costs, in operation and maintenance costs. So it's incredibly expensive, and then there would be no environmental impact on the Red River of the North. There'd be no increase in water quality.
And that plant in Moorhead is less than 10 years old.
Right.
They built it according to all the federal standards when they built it, and when it was permitted, now they're getting hit with all kinds of new conditions.
They would be when the new facility, when they are re-up their permit. That's right.
Anyone else on the council? I have a question. Cities are being considered as the agents for meeting these new standards. but yet our water sources don't start and stop in a city. I mean, our water system here flows down through the, the Crow system, the Little Crow, the North Fork, the East Fork, the West Fork. Well, I don't know how many streams there are, but it comes down through our lake systems to the north. There's all kinds of agricultural runoff into the streams, and yet it's the city that is potentially liable here for all these new costs when the pollution is spread out, well beyond the city, if there is pollution.
Right.
So how, what happens to that part of the discussion about point sources of pollution that are outside of the city of, outside of a city or outside of the city of Willmar?
Well, I think that's a really interesting question, and it's the 800-pound gorilla that nobody wants to deal with. And I think that the reason that the Pollution Control Agency comes down so hard on cities is because they're identifiable. And when you're talking about really addressing water quality, you're talking about addressing sources that are dispersed, widespread, and don't conform to a particular jurisdiction. But cities are, you know where the city of Willmar is on a map, and you know who their wastewater operators are, and you know when they're going to come up, when they need to re-up their permit, and it's easy to hit them. Politically, it's easy to get some mileage by ratcheting down their standards or hitting them with standards that just don't apply.
But yet the pollution could be coming in from the east and from the west and
Right.
from the north before it even arrives in Willmar.
Right, and I think that the CGMC's position is that this is a state problem. It is not a problem that can be fixed, or it can be addressed by cities, but it's not a problem that can be fixed by cities. And that's why you need to have you actually have to have real money put up by the state. The state is putting actual state dollars out of the general fund towards. And until the state actually does that, you're really not going to see any increase in water quality.
All right. Anyone else here? Councilmember Fagerly.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I counted you have about 68 or 69 members. Is that stable, or are you declining or increasing membership?
The CGMC their membership is stable. I mean, every year we lose one or two, but we pick up another one or two. It's kind of, we're constantly one up or one down, but that's a stable membership.
I see St. Cloud isn't on here anymore.
Nope, St. Cloud left the CGMC 3 years ago, I think, 2005. Yeah.
Don't they dump into the Mississippi with some?
Yes, St. Cloud does, and St. Cloud, their discharge, yeah, they do, and it's an issue that St. Cloud has decided that it's going to go on its own, So.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
The membership has stayed in the 60s. When I was president of the coalition, the membership was 62. I think that was in 1999.
Mm.
So it's always been in that 60 range, and now it's up a little bit. So.
Yeah.
The City of Willmar has been a charter member of the Coalition of Greater Minnesota Cities ever since it started.
And we're very, very thankful for that.
Mm-hmm. Good. Anyone else wish to question either Holly or Joe about issues? Or Holly, you want to come back up?
Yeah, I'm just going to come up, and I can be real brief because
Thank you.
Thanks, Joe.
we also work on transportation, annexation, and economic development, as you're aware, and I'll just briefly talk about transportation and annexation. Unfortunately, I get to talk about the vetoed items that we worked on, which was very unfortunate. I worked on transportation, and another stated priority of the new party in power, and I think many people were very optimistic of a comprehensive transportation bill passing in the 2007 session. But as many of you know, Governor Pawlenty came in with a same no new tax pledge. And so we knew that the name of the game was possibly going to be a veto override attempt. The CGMC took a little bit different strategy this year. We knew with that situation coming in that we would need to work on a pared down transportation bill with the hopes of getting more Republican support. Therefore, we advocated for a 5-cent gas tax increase, and we also worked on the motor vehicle sales tax constitutional amendment language. It was a big issue in 2006 with no funding being dedicated for highways in the language of the constitutional amendment. So that was another must, getting that 60% guarantee to highways with passage of the constitutional amendment. Those were the two items in our bill. And we were able to get 8 Republican signatures on a gas tax increase, which is significant because you only needed 5 to override a veto. What initially ended up happening is that both the House and the Senate put forth large transportation bills, the Senate being a little bit larger than the House, both with 10-cent gas tax increases. Neither bill passed with the 2/3 majority to override a governor's veto. So when the transportation conferees came into conference committee, they produced one, what would be considered a compromise, pared-down transportation bill with a 5-cent gas tax increase. That did pass both houses with 2/3 majority. And I will speak to your legislators on this issue, and that Representative Junkie is very strong on transportation, and he's an advocate for Greater Minnesota highways and also transit. The CGMC also decided to work on Greater Minnesota Transit if there's going to be more transit dollars coming in with the constitutional amendment. Many Greater Minnesota cities have needs as well in the transit area. We have an aging population and other needs as well. Senator Gimsey, being a new legislator, while he didn't vote for the initial larger Senate bill, he did vote in favor of the comprehensive transportation bill with the 5-cent gas tax increase. And I think he was only one of 4 Republicans in the Senate. So that was significant as well. Like I had said, I included just a little bit on the side what was included in that final bill. 5-cent gas tax increase. There was a new funding mechanism that triggered an increase in the gas tax if you have bonding and your debt service goes into the red for trunk highway bonding. It triggers an initial gas tax increase to cover the red of the bonding. So if you hear that this bill had 7.5 cents instead of 5 cents gas tax increase, that's why. 60% of the MVESTA to highways, 4% to Greater Minnesota Transit, which is 2% above what the governor had recommended and pushed for. And it also included a half-cent metro sales tax for transportation in the metro area. This is significant because I think this is the real sticking point even now in special session discussions, is that it's our perspective that the DFL probably won't let a comprehensive bill go without addressing transit in it. And I don't know that the governor, he previously had not supported, and I don't think he continues to support any sales tax for transit or transportation in the metro area. Unfortunately, the bill was vetoed. The veto override was addressed at about 11 o'clock before the midnight adjournment of session. And because that bill was we were not able to override the governor's veto, they passed initially during the day previously what's called a lights-on funding bill. It basically keeps the lights on at MnDOT, or off, as some people say. It allocates their budget, and that's it, bare bones funding. So that is the final bill that we did end up with, which is very unfortunate considering the recent problems that MnDOT has had keeping up with infrastructure and the many waiting projects that are waiting to be done. I should mention that there was also an additional $20 million to Metro Transit in that bill as well to prevent service cuts. As far as CGMC, we worked very hard on this issue this session, advocating for passage of this bill with letters, emails, calls, working with legislators very closely, anything we could do to support that veto override. And that was because this is probably one of the fairest bills Greater Minnesota will ever see as far as transportation funding. So it was very unfortunate the CGMC feels that this bill was vetoed. So any questions on transportation?
How did our legislators vote on the override of the veto?
Junkie did. Representative Junkie did.
He
he voted in favor of it. And it did not reach the Senate because once it failed in the House,
it was dead.
It was dead.
All right.
Okay.
All right.
And then very briefly, annexation, another important issue to our cities. It's important that we have good annexation laws so that our cities can facilitate smart and environmentally conscious growth. I've heard that there's no real contentious issues for annexation. You're very lucky. Many of our cities do have very contentious and expensive annexation issues. So it's very important that we keep on top of good annexation law. Nothing really happened this year, but we may be looking forward to next year as moving some real significant annexation law. And I also just included briefly in your packet a recent annexation, it says annexation update, a recent court ruling regarding adjacent properties. Briefly, the city of Perham wanted to annex the proposed property in Orange due to Job Z development, and the township was blocking that. So they annexed what's a little corridor to make it adjacent. This is informally called balloon and string annexations. The township opposed this and the appealed to district court, and the city did win this proposal. So it sets precedent for continued balloon and string annexations. Chris Hood and Brandon Fitzsimmons in our office work on annexation law all the time, and you can use them as a resource if you ever have any questions. Any other questions about anything that I can answer?
I guess not. I think everybody's satisfied. Thank you for your presentation.
Thank you very much for your time and for your
driving out
membership.
to be with us. We appreciate that. All right, safe travels. We'll move on in the agenda. I'd like to go to number 13, which is that consideration of a preliminary plat, the Waterview Business Park, second edition. And Mick, can you address that?
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, before you tonight is a request from Waterview Business Park, second edition. They're talking about splitting the proposed site from the gas station, creating an additional lot in the northwest corner of the site. The lot has frontage, but it does not have direct access, and when the Planning Commission approved of the preliminary plat, they placed conditions that there be a private access easement and utility easements be added as requested, and that any pending assessments be paid in full or reapportioned. And staff is recommending council's approval of the preliminary plat.
All right, thank you. Council members? Questions?
Move to approve, Mr. Mayor.
Second.
There's a motion and a second to approve this preliminary plat in the Waterview development area. Further comment about this? Does everybody understand? Everybody understand what's going on here? Okay.
Walmart's not going to develop it, and they're going to sell it, right?
Option 2.
Option 2, yeah.
Does anybody know what, is there a buyer that wants that corner of the property?
Mr. Mayor, I could speak to the issue if you'd like.
Sure. Please introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Will Matzik. I'm with Olson Associates. We were the engineers on the Walmart development. It's under construction at the current time. Walmart is requesting to subdivide their lot. Originally, when we presented our site plan on Walmart's behalf, we had a leased area in that northwest corner of the lot. They're now requesting to actually plat that as a separate lot, and that would give them flexibility in finding a user for that location. Some users would prefer to lease that area, and others would prefer to own it. This would just give Walmart more alternatives as far as utilizing that space, and that is the reason why we're here presenting that. It doesn't change anything other than it's actually a separate lot. So if anybody has any questions, I'd certainly be happy to answer them.
Councilmember Gardner?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Will, welcome. You're just talking about Lot 2. You're not talking about this Outlot J.
That's correct. It's just Lot 2 there in the northwest corner.
Very good. Thank you.
Councilmember DeBleek?
Yeah, maybe a question of Kevin or Mick, but if they divide this lot out as a separate lot in the corner, what does that do for assessments on the property and the water issues that may come off the property? They have to have a water control of the water flow off the property. What does it do for those?
Well, I don't think it changes the control of the water flow. That's already taken care of in the whole stormwater review. But there's a cost for that. There's a cost for the parking lot. There's a cost for everything. And I believe it's on square footage. So we'll just make some special assessments by square footage and assign those same assessments to the square footage of this lot, reducing the larger lot.
But any future assessments could be assessed against this lot?
Correct. If we came through there with a new road repair in 20 years or something, most likely a lineal footage would be assessed to that lot and then the residue lot.
Anyone else? A couple simple questions.
Sure.
Is Walmart looking to sell it, or they're just looking to lease it to somebody else other than they putting a gas station out there?
Walmart themselves generally always lease these particular areas, but on some occasions they will sell them now. But they don't actually make a decision on that until actually the store is open, and then after which time they look to develop that lot, whether it be themselves or through a lease or through selling it to someone else. So.
Is it likely that it could be something other than a gas station on that corner?
I believe at this time they're still looking to incorporate gas on that location, although this will provide them more alternatives in finding a user for that spot. So,
I guess what I'm leading to is, if they sell the land and it's not a gas station, what kind of other property might end up there?
I guess
wide open to anything?
At this point, I think their preference is certainly gas, and they're going to try to do that. But if they were to, sell that lot for another user, that user would have to go through the, site plan approval process that, any other user or, development would go through with the city here. So,
all right.
There would certainly be opportunity for staff review and comment and so forth.
Okay. Is there a motion on the table now, Kevin, to approve?
Yes, there is. Reese and Anderson.
All right. Any other questions before you vote? Okay, this is a roll call then?
Simple motion.
Simple motion. Those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Will, thanks for coming in. Now we'll go to the Willmar City Council open forum. And this is a chance for any citizen to address the council and the mayor. Is there anyone in the audience that wishes to speak to the council tonight? Charlie, come on up. Introduce yourself.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. My name is Charlie Oakes. I live at 1022 3rd Street Southwest, which is sort of behind Lulu Beans on 3rd Street there. Peggy and I moved to town 3 years ago in 2004, and we bought an older 1.5-story home that is a little smaller, but it had been remodeled from top to bottom. The kids had bought the house from their parents, and then they had the basement redone with a Jesse Treble waterproof basement system, and then they finished the basement so that it gave us a second bathroom and another bedroom and a family room. And about a year later, when 3rd Street was opened up for road repairs because the street hadn't been replaced in 50 years, we had a heavy rainstorm. And we had a lot of water in the yard and some damage to 2 of my vehicles, about $600 of the damage to vehicles. My next door neighbor ended up spending $800 getting everything in his basement removed with a dumpster. And then he no longer had use of his basement. But my basement pretty much held up at that time. Then when the street was finished off, the city that had previously granted, of course, the building permit to finish my basement, the city connected my sump pump line directly into the storm drain. So then when we had this storm 2 weeks ago, and the storm drain was overwhelmed, and my understanding is the water coming down Willmar Avenue was overwhelmed, which caused water to back up 3rd Street to our neighborhood. At that point, my sump pump could no longer push water. So I ended up with a couple inches of water in my basement, which ended up with having to replace the carpeting and the baseboards and get it disinfected, a little bit of damage to a computer, another car got ruined electronically, altogether about $9,000 worth of damage. Now the good news is I did have sump pump failure insurance. So I basically just had the nuisance of taking the day off and a $1,000 deductible. And the question, what do I do now? Because now, if I went to sell the house, I would have to disclose that the property has been flooded twice in the last 2 years. The reason that it now has an assessed value that's more than twice as much as it had before I purchased it is because the improvements that were made to the home. And now those improvements are just one rainstorm away from being wrecked again. And so what we would like is assurances from the City of Willmar that our residential neighborhood will not be used as a holding pond during heavy rainstorms. And that's pretty much where we're at. So I think that's my 3 minutes.
All right, thank you, Charlie. You're 1022 3rd Street Southwest, all right. Warren Jorgensen? I should explain to the audience, and I think you probably know this, that we take testimony tonight, but decisions aren't usually made here tonight. But this information is fed into the city staff and into city committees for further discussion. Good evening, Warren.
Good evening, Mayor. Mr. Mayor, council members, thank you for the opportunity to be here once again to continue the stormwater issue that we have not resolved. Before I get going, I want to thank Councilmember Christensen, Councilmember Dockin, and Councilmember Gardner for their support thus far in our dilemma on behalf of my wife and myself. As you know, a couple years ago we were here before you, most of the folks in this group, almost to the month. In fact, September we were here in 2005, and we're back again tonight. Most of the folks that are here are homeowners in the area of 10th and Candy OI. Last time we were here, we asked the city to permanently stop the localized flooding of contaminated stormwater in our neighborhood. It's still going on. Mayor Heike, you said 2 years ago the council understood our concern and referred the matter to City Administration and the Public Works Safety Committee. Mr. Mayor, I'm here tonight to tell you that I have more than a concern at this point. Please do not do that again, as City Administration has produced no results for us. They are your employees, and the council needs to make sure that they perform their duties. I personally feel some of the city staff need to be reminded who runs this city and who they answer to. This time we are demanding that you fix the problem now. Stop spending our tax dollars on studies that are not implemented. Holding city staff accountable, it's too late for our home, but it may not be too late for some of the other folks in our neighborhood. 2 years ago we asked you to make it possible for us to buy flood insurance. You denied our request. I have spoken with folks in Washington, Chicago, and Minnesota officials about the city's refusal to participate in the National Flood Program. And frankly, all of them are mystified why we don't. I, as a tax-paying citizen, wish I had flood insurance. I probably wouldn't be in the predicament I am right now. We have a solution for you at the 10th and Candy OI Avenue. It's simple. Take some of the funds out of the rainy day account the city has and remove the houses and restore the natural order of the land back to a holding pond. The 190 acres that drain into the 10th and Candy OI Avenue intersection can very possibly be held in the holding pond situation. I took the liberty to run some numbers in reference to the 190 acre that drains into our intersection. And let's assume for an instant that the 4-inch rainfall that we had 2 weeks ago, 1 inch of that would soak into that 190 acres. The remaining 3 inches of water would probably run off and enter the drainage system for our area of town. 190 acres with 4 inches of standing water on it, that wouldn't go anyplace, equals 20.6 million gallons of water that would be laying on that ground. Take away the 1 inch that might soak in, that's 5.1 million gallons. The remaining 3 inches that would probably turn into runoff would be 15 million gallons of water headed for our intersection at 10th and Candy OI. In my estimation, that's a little too much water for us to handle. We also don't appreciate having our basements turned into holding ponds for the stormwater, contaminated stormwater that's plaguing us in our area. Our home and our lives have been destroyed because of the lack of action by the council and city staff. The photos that I'm going to hand out to you shortly will testify to that. The contaminated flood of water surrounding our home, our wall collapsed because of this flooding water, is water that was outside the building, wasn't inside the structure. It didn't come from wall seepage or anything like that in this particular case. My wife Jan Lee and I, Jan Lee was born and raised here. I moved to Willmar in 1966. We love our neighbors in our city. We both have served the Willmar Fire Department. We both have given to this community. We have had several opportunities to move to other cities over the past 31 years, and now, to be honest with you, I'm wishing we probably would have. We assure you that this time we will not just go away and wait for the next storm. My wife and I personally are asking the city to do the right thing, make our home livable again in an area that is not in a flooding area of the city of Willmar. I read some of the comments that have been on the Willmar Tribune article pages, and some individual wrote something that I thought was kind of unique. We pay our city taxes every year. You flood our home every year. Then when we need your help the most, you stay silent. Only in Willmar, the all-American city. So those are the crux of my comments. I have some facts that I would like to share with the council in reference to this. Fact number one, 15 seconds longer in our basement, Mr. Mayor, my wife and I probably wouldn't be here tonight. We'd probably be dead. The basement filled up in a minute and a half once the concrete walls caved in from the outside. I've already mentioned to you about my crude numbers with the amount of water in that drainage system and how it's impacting our intersection and our lives. We have had, and we continue to hear about this 10-year flooding of contaminated water. The fact is it happens in our area quite frequently, and I'll give you some figures that I've received from the Weather Service about that. In fact, taxpayers still cannot participate in the National Flood Insurance Program in our city, and I just can't understand that. And I don't understand why the city wouldn't make that happen for us. Fact is, no positive actions have taken place to stop the flooding, and we're back here 2 years revisiting the same issues. We are having and continue to have major erosion and destruction of personal property in our intersection. Fact, the city continues to add water trapping properties to the overloaded and deteriorating storm drainage system each year. Lots of new construction going on. And I know at the meeting that we attended on the Public Works and Safety, it was indicated that all the new construction has controls about how that water enters the drainage ditch out there. And I will show you some pictures of my concern about some of those so-called control measures. I'm also interested to hear what the city is doing with the MPCA plan that's required to control floodwaters that the city has responded to. So, again, Mr. Mayor and Council, I hope the city does the right thing and tries to make our home livable again. It's a mess, and again, I thank the council members that have supported our efforts to this point. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jorgensen. Robin Antonsen.
I would like to defer my 3 minutes to Mr. Jorgensen if he still has not completed what he needed to say.
I think I'm okay. Did you want to say anything, Robin?
No, I won't.
Okay. Ann Lanke.
Hello, my name is Ann Lanke, and I live at 1005 Candio High Avenue. We live across the street from the Jorgensens. I would just like to say a few things. One, I was standing here 2 years ago with the rest of my neighbors. I'm just as nervous today as I was 2 years ago. The reason you didn't hear from us last year is we never had over 1.25 inches of rain in any month. So we were all safe last year. We had a great summer. This year has brought heartache to our neighborhood. Some of the neighbors had a lot of damage. Some of us had some damage. But all of us have concerns. It was heartbreaking to watch the Jorgensens across the street bring all their belongings out of their basement covered with muck and try to save what they could. The rest of our neighborhood is worried of who will be the next house that something like this could happen to. We have come again to this council meeting with a positive attitude that our problem can have a solution, that the city will want to do all that is possible to stop the flooding in our area. We are desperate and we need your help, and we need it soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Ann. Myron Carla? Did I say it right?
Carlson.
Oh, Carlson. Thank you. Myron?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor and Councilman. I'm Myron Carlson, live at 812 10th Street Southwest. My concern is as I approach the intersection there and there's rain that comes up, and I'm only less than a block away from there, that there's often a lot of gushing up and water there, and as I look at the catch basin there and the curbing around it, there's some sinking going on, there's some erosion going on around there, and which is only evident of a lot of water that's not getting down the proper channel, in fact. And some of that water, or it has been gushing up actually near the sidewalks, and there are a couple holes that are real close to the sidewalk there because of the erosion. With school starting and any other time too, there are children or somebody could step in those holes, and I'm not sure. I understand they are pretty deep. They tunnel underneath and toward the catch basin and even underneath the sidewalk. So I think I'm approaching just basically this is from a safety concern for our community, and also the amount of erosion that's been happening, and also where does that erosion go? It goes right down the storm sewer and creates sediment, which builds up, which also reduces the flow of water that's being discharged. Thank you.
Thank you, Myron. Mel, have you or your staff addressed that at all, that there might be underground erosion going on there? Have you seen any of that yet?
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, the day following when we were pointed out some of these areas, we did look at it. We haven't followed up as far as repair at this time.
Have you done any probing with?
Not at this time yet, no.
Steel pipes or anything like that? Okay. Barbara Carlson, did you want to say something?
I'm Carolyn Carlson, and I live in...
Carolyn, okay. Did you want to say something? Okay. Jordan and Randy?
Mr. Mayor, they were here for the weeds.
Oh, the weed control, that's right, thank you. Vera Novak? Good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of the City Council. My name is Vera Novak. My address is 1024 3rd Street Southwest. This is the corner of 3rd Street and Robbins Avenue. I live right next door to Charlie, only on the corner. Last month when the heavy rain fell, my back porch and my garage flooded. There was enough water in the garage to actually have items on the garage for float. The siding on my home had a watermark indicated by the residue left from the water that was at least 8 inches above the ground. This is the second time that this has happened since I purchased my home in the year 2000. I am here to find out if the city has plans to solve the flooding problem in my neighborhood. I am the chairman of the Housing and Redevelopment Authority here in and for the city of Willmar. Earlier this summer, when the HRA asked for your support in the Small Cities application for the housing project in Southwest Willmar, I heard comments about rehabbing existing housing stock from the council members. I'm in complete agreement with rehabbing existing housing stock, and I hope that the HRA is involved in that process. My neighborhood provides opportunities for rehabbing existing housing stock. My neighborhood also provides opportunity for working class families to own homes. There's not much incentive, however, to improve your property if there's potential for flooding. Thank you.
Thank you, Vera. Catherine Kellevaeg? Is she still here? Catherine, did you want to say something? Did she leave? All right. Is she gone? All right. Ed, sure. Welcome, Ed.
Mr. Mayor, City Council members, I'm Ed Scherer. I live at 412 Minnesota Avenue Southeast. Back in 1999, I stayed with the Jorgensens for a few months, and I had some of my belongings stored in their basement. And once again, it rained, and they got, I forget if it was like a foot and a half of water in their basement. So I can date back the problem to at least 99 that they've been having this major flooding issue there. I just want you to know, the people that don't know, the insurance company, when they came in to look, they said, this isn't our problem, this is due to the city, and they walked away from them. So I guess I'm asking you to, please step up and do the right thing here. The situation needs to be addressed, needs to be something done with it, not just talked about in committees. Warren and Jan, I don't know how close you know that they came to losing their life down there. They were trying to put things up, bring belongings up. When the wall came in, it was about knee-deep from what they said. And Jan got up past the door going upstairs. Warren had all he could do to pull the door against the current, and with Jan on the other side using her legs to push the door open far enough in order for Warren to get through before the door slammed shut, he just about drowned in his own basement. So it's come time that, are we going to lose a life over this? It needs to be fixed. The other thing is, like Myron Carlson said, what if there's some kid playing out there and ends up drowning? The city is responsible. You just got a system that's not keeping up with the capacities. So as far as safety's sake, I ask that you do take care of the problem, and the Jorgensens need help here. They're out of home. It's condemned. So anything you can do and as fast as you can do it would be really appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you, Ed. Laura Becker? Your husband want to speak? David? Welcome.
Mr. Mayor, Councilman, thank you for giving me the opportunity, staff also, and general public. You've heard a lot about the corner of 10th and Candy Ojai tonight. I do appreciate the fact that some of you were there the morning of the August 21st to see firsthand the water levels and the devastation that occurred at that corner. The public has also heard much about this problem in the paper, and many opinions are being shared about why this is happening. Why is this happening? Anybody know? I don't know. And I doubt that anybody knows exactly why it's been happening. We know now from testimony that we've heard tonight that it's been happening at least since 1999. So at the Public Works Committee last Thursday, when we hear, well, these are 100-year events, and, what can we do? Well, they're not 100-year events. These are happening more frequently, and I don't know the probability statistics on this, but if an event occurs once in 100 years and then it occurs 3 times over the last 10 years, what's the probability of that? I'd say the odds are pretty high. Correct me if I'm wrong. I hadn't heard I'm sorry. A week ago, we heard testimony at the Public Works Committee meeting that the water at the corner of 10th and Candy Ojai can rise up to 30 inches high. I would guess that's about up to here. We also heard testimony, those that were in attendance, that the height between 10th and Candy Ojai, which would be here, and Miller Park is about 2.5 feet. Sounds like about the same, doesn't it? Our homes sit in that flood water. Imagine that it was your home that was sitting in that flood water. How would you feel? We also heard at the meeting that these were 100-year events. I already talked about that. I'm sorry, I'm a little shook up because I didn't know that Warren and Jan had almost died in that flood. 2 years ago, we came to you. I stood right here, talked to you emotionally about what was going to happen, and everything was assured, oh yeah, we're going to look into it, we're going to look at it. I would like an answer tonight. What has been done? A week ago, actually, there was a motion put before the Public Works Committee that I'd like to address. The first part of the motion, or I mentioned three things. The first part of the motion was the fact that we should go back to the bar report, which was done evidently 2 years ago, and review it. Do we need to really review that again? We already looked at it 2 years ago. What's it going to bring? What are the answers that we're going to have out of that report? I don't think that there are any. The second part of the motion was the fact that we should look at holding ponds, both at Kennedy School, possibly at Miller Park, and possibly at Garfield. The testimony that we heard, or that I heard at that meeting, was the fact that a holding pond might help alleviate the problem 10 to 15% at the corner of 10th and Candy Ojai Avenue. Well, if the water gets up to here, 30 inches, if you reduce that 10%, that's about 3 inches, right? So we still have a 27-inch problem at 10th and Candy Ojai. If you did Miller Park, Garfield, and Kennedy, you'd reduce it 30%. So what do we have? About a 20-inch problem then, still at 10th and Candy Ojai. It's not acceptable. It ain't going to work. I would say that the third part of that proposal was probably the most viable part of the proposal. And that was the fact that you already have a natural holding pond. I don't know if you know it or not, but you have a rainwater catch basin that's about 3 blocks long by 3 blocks long. Well, excuse me, I shouldn't say that because the two corners come in, but it's at least 2 blocks by 3 blocks. And that's basically sits in the backyard, the center of it sits in the backyard of Kathy Calavig's house. I don't know why she's not here to speak, but I can only imagine that she's a little emotional too. You would be also if you had 5 feet of water in your basement last Tuesday morning. I live right next door to her. And by the way, 2 years ago we heard that according to the elevation maps in the city of Willmar, the lowest point is sitting right in her backyard. The Jorgensens live right to the east of her, and I live right to the west of her. You can imagine my situation. I'm not going to get into it. Luckily, I have a sump pump. I have a beaver system, which is supposed to help me, and I'll never get water in my basement. We did, just like the testimony you heard about other systems in basements. 2 years ago, we all came before you. We all asked for help. I don't know of anything that was done. Here we are again. We're asking you again for help. This is a city issue. This is not a personal property issue. We've heard that lives can be at stake here. I truly agree. What if we continually have children walking up and down Candy Ojai Avenue that come from Kennedy School? Are they going to fall in one of those holes that's just off the sidewalks? I have doorways in my shed, my garage, that all of a sudden after last Tuesday's rain are off-center. The ground beneath us is clearly shifting. It's clearly moving. If you put that amount of water in one spot and it's bare ground, something's going to happen. The water is going to create underground streams and rivers, call them what you want. But the water is going to go somewhere, and it's going to create its own way to get there. Now, what's up above that, who knows? Could be a sidewalk. It could be a foundation to a home. It could be a road. I don't know if you've all given that much thought. But you know how many school buses go through the intersection of 10th and Candy Ojai? Are you willing to bet that there's not a sinkhole underneath there somewhere? I'm not. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Would anybody else like to address the council tonight? All right. We've heard your testimonies. Staff has heard the testimony. That will be considered. I think you'll be hearing in a few minutes from our public safety chairperson the discussion that's already been taking place. And there'll be more discussion with the budget proposals coming up, things of that nature. So we will then move on. Next is the Finance Committee report for August 27th. Councilmember Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First item on our agenda was the Fire Department budget request. Finance Director Okins presented a memo from Fire Chief Calvin requesting that $2,900 be transferred from available funds in the machinery auto line item of the Fire Department's 2007 capital improvements budget to buildings and structures. This transfer is necessary to cover expenditures at the fire station for rewiring the response clock. Following discussion, there was a motion made, seconded, and passed, and I would introduce a resolution to transfer $2,900 from machinery auto to building structures in the 2007 Fire Department capital improvement budget.
Second. We have a motion and a second for a resolution to transfer $2,900 from machinery auto to buildings and structures in the Fire Department capital improvement budget. Comment. Kevin, is this a roll call?
It is, sir.
All right, roll call.
Councilmember Christensen.
Aye.
Anderson.
Aye.
Swenson.
Aye.
Gardner.
Aye.
Dockin.
Aye.
Fagerly.
Aye.
DeBleek.
Aye.
And Reese.
Aye.
8 ayes, 0 nays.
That resolution passes.
The next item was the Economic Development Commission budget presentation. Mr. Rehnquist, the EDC Executive Director, reviewed the 2008 budget with us. He noted that the 2008 revenue includes $455,000 from the county tax levy, which is the same amount levied for 2007 and 2006. The EDC is also proposing to utilize $45,000 from the agency's reserves as another source of funding. Overall budget expenditures for 2008 in the amount of $490,497 is a decrease of $11,197 from the 2007 budget. We had a little discussion on the history of the fiscal agent services provided for the EDC. Candy Ojai County performed these services for their first 2 years with the intent that the city would assume this responsibility the following 2 years. As of December 31st, 2007, the city will have completed its second year. We had a brief discussion regarding additional costs that would be incurred if the EDC were to seek a fiscal agent other than the city. Mr. Rehnquist responded that the line item budgeting accounting costs would probably increase from $3,500, which is paid to the city, to possibly something in the neighborhood of $9,000. Additionally, health insurance premiums may substantially increase if the EDC would need to obtain coverage through another company. Staff is going to research whether or not the EDC could continue participating in the city's health insurance program if the fiscal agent service is terminated. Back to the budget. Following discussion, there was a motion, second and passed, and I would introduce that motion to approve the EDC 2008 budget as proposed.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the Economic Development Center's 2008 budget. Further comment? I have a question. Does the 08 budget then include the city's continuing the financial position?
Yes.
And Mr. Mayor, if I may, the comment was made that I think that if we're looking to make a change, we may have to look at that for 2009 perhaps rather than at this late time in the budgeting process. But I know that there's going to be a follow-up meeting scheduled sometime soon to work on some details and issues still to be resolved.
All right. Any other comment about this? That's a simple motion, Kevin. Those in favor of that motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
The next item was the 2008 preliminary property tax levy. Staff informed us that the City of Willmar is required to provide the 2008 preliminary tax levy amount to Candioi County by September 15th, 2007. Once submitted, this amount cannot be increased, but it may be decreased. The Mayor's proposed 2008 budget includes a levy in the amount of $3,133,646, which is an increase of $326,651 over 2007. Primary reason for the increase is due to the state of Minnesota's reduction in local government aid for 2008, which we heard a little bit about earlier. It was noted that the projected tax impact per property owner will be minimal. The proposed 2008 tax capacity rate is 26.138, which is an increase of 0.515 or 0.2% over the 2007 rate. As an example, a property valued at $100,000 would see an increase of $5.15 over the 2000 property tax. Now, these calculations are based on the city's proposed changes and don't reflect anything that may be proposed and implemented by the school district or the county. Large capital projects of recent interest to various groups or neighborhoods throughout the community, things like quiet zones, downtown ingress, egress, stormwater, and so forth, are not included in the general operating budget. Fiscal constraints precluded the mayor's consideration at this time. Other revenue sources can be pursued for these activities, and or the City Council has the option of increasing the proposed preliminary levy. In 2007, the city levied an additional $200,000 to be used only for public works street improvements. The proposed 2008 levy includes a like amount for that same purpose. The only new major revenue source being proposed for 2008 is a natural gas franchise fee that will generate an estimated $250,000 annually. It was noted that the HRA's proposed 2008 levy also needs to be certified to the county by September 15th, and they're requesting that amount to be $141,796. We're going to hear the mayor's budget proposal in detail next Monday night.
Right.
But I'm wondering if perhaps you want to make any comments on some of the highlights now, and when you're done, I have some things that I would like the council to consider.
The preparation of the city operating budget takes about 6 months. It begins in the month of April and May when we ask our department heads to begin to formulate their budgets for the next fiscal year. And our fiscal year is the same as a calendar year, so it goes from January to December. The department heads work on that for about 1 to 2 months. Then that's brought forward to our city administrator, who reviews everything. I start looking at the budget usually in July and August and make my suggestions, additions or deletions to the budget, and then it's formally presented to the City Council as a proposed budget in early September. The City Council then has approximately 2 months to 2.5 months to review the proposed budget. And the City Council is the final authority. They can change the budget, raise it, lower it, whatever they wish to do. but it's my duty as a mayor to propose it. And the concerns that I have each year are maintaining a proper level of services and at the same time trying to meet the needs of the community. And you can imagine the amount of requests that can come before the city of people wanting things from the city in terms of financial assistance. It's amazing. Many of which we are not able to respond to, either because I don't believe it's either the obligation of the city or if we have the financial resources compared to other needs, which I believe are higher needs. We have some programs that we do fund on an ongoing basis. One example is the Meals on Wheels program. We've been funding that program since it began, and I think it began 30 to 40 years ago, something like that. And the city was there in the beginning, and it will continue to be there. I believe that's one of the programs that we do not want to see lapse or die, and it serves our growing elderly population and allows people to stay in their homes a little bit longer. And that's good for our community, it's good for the quality of life. But other things come and go. In my proposed budget for this year, one of the items that we are now taking out of the budget has been the annual allocation to the Southwest Initiative Foundation. Now, we've been a sponsor of that foundation for many years, but with budget cutbacks at the state level, I see this as an arbitrary kind of donation. We have been giving them $10,000 a year. They came in here about a month ago with their annual report saying that they now have $50 million in their foundation. I believe that at this time the city can use its limited resources in other ways. And so I'm proposing to the council that that donation to the Initiative Foundation now be eliminated. Now the council may reverse that. They may disagree with me and say, no, we don't want to reverse that. We want to leave it in the budget. Then they got to find some way to fund that. What I propose to the public is a balanced budget, revenues and expenditures being balanced. We do not operate with a deficit in the city of Willmar. We do not operate with a deficit. The total operational budget for 2008 that I will be proposing is a little over $22 million for this city. It's $22,618,439. This city has a population of about 19,000 people, and it's a fluid population. It goes up and down a little bit depending on the season and the time of the year, but it's about 19,000. One of the things that we always do in preparing the budget is look at how our city compares to other regional cities around the state of Minnesota in terms of population and the level of services, the number of employees. There are 23 regional cities in the state of Minnesota. And a regional city is a city that has a population between 15 and 25,000 people. There's 23 cities like that in greater Minnesota. We've always tried to position Willmar somewhere in the middle of these 23 regional cities. We don't want to be the most expensive, nor do we want to be, the cheapest. And we try to do that by comparing our employee base to other cities of like nature, our police department, our fire department, public works, to see if we have more or less than other cities our size. And generally, we are operating somewhere in the middle of these 23 cities. A few things are not in the operational budget, and that's what Councilmember Anderson is alluding to. One is there's a lot of public discussion about quiet zones, and people are concerned about the noise of trains in this community. And the noise has increased due to new federal regulations, which calls for longer blasts on the horns and louder blasts on the horns as they go through intersections. The city of Willmar has 5 railroad crossings. Now, cities across Minnesota can quiet those intersections down, but it has to be at local cost. There's no pot of gold out there. There's nobody saying, we'll help you fund it, unless we can find some money at the federal level. And we've asked our lobbyist who works in Washington, D.C., if he can find some federal money to help offset quiet zones. What we're looking at is the crossing on 7th Street. The one that goes by the Lakeview Apartments, the high-rise on 7th Street, the one just outside of this building. I think that that's probably the busiest intersection, the loudest, seems to impact the most people. And I've asked our city staff to do a study of this. They arranged that through a firm that came in and studied these railroad crossings. Now we have to go to the railroad themselves, and they will tell us what is allowed in terms of regulations. 7th Street also has the most railroad crossings. I think there are 8 or 9 out there. And apparently because of the width of the crossing, it requires extra engineering, extra gates, etc. We're waiting for the railroads to come back with what they will accept or what they will allow for a quiet zone crossing. Estimates are ranging anywhere from $250,000 to $750,000, and it hasn't been nailed down yet. That's not in the city budget. That's not part of the operational budget. However, if the city council believes that that's a necessary expenditure, and that'll be their option this fall or this winter, we will find the money to do it. We may have to, hopefully the lobbyists in Washington will find some money, or we may drain some of the limited reserves that the city has to put toward that quiet zone, if that's what the council wishes to do. Another issue is the discussion about opening up Litchfield Avenue downtown. That's been going on for several years. People want Litchfield Avenue opened up again. That's not in the operational budget. However, if the council wishes to consider that, they can consider that in the street improvement budget, which will be set up and organized this winter. What that would mean is if they open up the east and west end of Litchfield Avenue, that will reduce the amount of money that can be put onto other streets. But it is possible to have that. It will impact the whole street improvement project. That will be up to the council to decide that. The third thing which we've all listened to you talk about tonight is this flooding problem. This is, this is a very complex issue. It's a very, very expensive issue. It's not easily resolved. Right now, there is no money being proposed in the operational budget. However, I think we will hear from Mr. Anderson and other members of the Finance Committee that they probably want to put some money into the budget. And the question then is, where does that money come from? Right now, the sources of revenue include property taxes. It goes on everybody's property tax. Other revenues are more limited than that, such as special assessments, licenses and permits. There's some intergovernmental transfers from the hospital and the utilities. But all those resources are already built into the operational budget. That's why I will be proposing to the City Council a new revenue stream, and that is the natural gas franchise fee. We don't have that now. It would go on everybody's natural gas bill. It would probably generate somewhere in the range of $250,000 a year. There are other fees that are possible, and you probably have heard of this from other cities. Other cities have a lot of fees that Willmar does not have. One prime example is the city of St. Paul. St. Paul has a boulevard fee. Can you believe that? A boulevard fee, because boulevards are in the public right-of-way. And so they assess everybody that has a boulevard a separate fee, and that covers things like tree trimming, sidewalk repair, or if nothing is done, you're still assessed a fee every year because of what might happen in the future. There are all kinds of fees that could be considered. We have a building permit fee, and that's in place for new construction or remodeling. That fee has not been adjusted since 1994. Now, I know some members of the City Council don't want to change that. And, they will have their chance to talk about that. That's not being proposed to be changed at this point, but it is something that's sitting there that might be changed. And there are any number of other fees that could be considered. But the point here is that whether you call it a property tax on your property or a fee, it comes out of all of our citizens' pockets. There is no new money sitting out there that we can tap into, and this is compounded by what the state has done by not passing the omnibus tax bill, which would have provided the city of Willmar with more than $500,000 had it been passed. The result is we are losing not only the increase we would have got, but our own local government aid has been reduced from 2006 to 2007. So we have to make up the difference in what we lose from the state and try to meet these new and growing needs in the city of Willmar, and at the same time balance the impact on all of our citizens and our businesses. That's the task of creating the city budget, and that's what I will be presenting formally next Monday night to the City Finance Committee, and they in turn will then start the discussion and the adjustments to that budget if they wish to do that. So the total budget again that's being proposed, $22,618,439. That results in a levy on our property taxes of just over $3 million for the citizens of Willmar. The proposed levy is $3,133,646. That's an 11% increase in city property taxes, just the city portion of your property taxes. We haven't heard from the county yet, and we haven't heard from the school district. That is still coming down the road. And then there's a small sliver that goes to the Economic Development Commission, and a small sliver of your property taxes that goes to Mid-Minnesota Development Commission. But the three big ones are the city, the county, and the school district. The city's portion is being proposed to go up 11.6%. That's to make up what we're losing from the state of Minnesota and to try to keep up with the growth of the city. And these other three issues are not even in the proposed budget: quiet zones, flood control, and opening up Litchfield Avenue. However, if the council wishes to pursue it, and I think they will pursue perhaps some of these, they'll have to also propose the funding mechanism to pursue this. And I would support that. I'm not opposed to doing this at all. But so far, what I can support is maintaining the current operation of the city so that we don't fall backwards. Now, if the state legislature were to call a special session, and if they were to consider the omnibus tax bill, which we heard tonight is not likely, that would help us greatly. Suddenly, they would be able to, hopefully if they pass something, it would help our whole funding mechanism for the city of Willmar. So if you wish to call your legislators, please do so. It would benefit all of us. But it sounded tonight like they're going to limit it to more the disaster relief rather than local government aid relief. We'll see what happens. Dennis, is that enough for brief comments?
For brief comments, yeah, I'd hate to have a detail.
Get a little carried away, but...
Okay. Yeah, you do a great job in putting the budget together. And I think what we need to remember tonight, what our task is to set the levy. We will get all the details of the budget and some of those things next week. So, again, when this is all said and done tonight, we have to come back and set the levy. And I have several suggestions as to what we may want to do in regard to some possible changes as we would understand the budget will be presented. And I want to focus, first of all, on the franchise fee. This body has discussed the franchise fee before, that concept, and it hasn't been well received, and it hasn't passed. But I think that maybe we need to take a little bit of a different tact and a little bit different look at this franchise fee. The residents of the city of Willmar seem to be willing to spend their money in taxes if they know what it's going for. And you've identified some of the big items that you don't have in your budget. I'd only add a couple of them, and we had talked about railroad loops and some bridges to go along with the quiet zones and opening up Litchfield Avenue. But it seems to me that the biggest issue facing our community right now has to do with this stormwater and flooding control. And we have talked about it in the past, and we haven't come up with any good solid answers. So I would propose that we dedicate the franchise fee money, which is about $250,000 a year, to resolving the floodwater and stormwater problem. In conjunction with that, I would ask that staff be directed to come up with a plan, how the money would be spent, how many years it might take to get this problem resolved, and I would also ask that we include Grass Lake in that discussion. and this could be a multi-year project to get this all done, but at least this gets us started and this gets us some funding. And then I would say, whenever this stormwater project is completed, however many years it takes, then the idea of the franchise fee comes back to the city council. And the city council would have the option of selecting another project if they think there's something that warrants that, or they could sunset the franchise fee. All of this goes about not just taking that money and putting it into the general fund. Now, we take that $250,000 out of the revenue stream, we have to do something to come back up with that $250,000. And that's not easy to do and it's not easy to say, but I am going to propose that we increase the levy by $250,000, and that would bring the 2008 proposed levy to $3,383,646,000. This would have impact on people's property taxes, and I think we have to recognize that, and it's something that we can't take lightly, nor can we take lightly the issues that are facing our community. So again, I think that it's certainly something that merits some discussion. Lastly, I would say that if, and the if didn't sound very good based on what we heard tonight, if there is a special session and the LGA tax bill, or the tax bill comes up and LGA funding is increased, then I would say that if we got more money in Willmar, that the first $250,000 of that increase would go back to offsetting the $250,000 that we proposed increasing the taxes by to cover the loss of revenue from the franchise fee. So that's a long story. I have a motion prepared, but maybe we should see what the council thinks about that.
So you're not making a proposal yet?
I'm going to make a motion.
You will make a motion?
Yes, I will.
But you want comment first. Councilmember Reese.
I like the idea very much, especially the stormwater. And I guess I would like to have that a little more clarified. I mean, we've got a motion that's going to be coming from Public Works, Public Safety in regards to investigating options of hopefully correcting what we've heard here tonight as far as difficulties with flooding. I guess it's both a question to you and maybe to staff, but when you're dealing with Grass Lake, I don't believe any money going towards Grass Lake is going to alleviate any flooding difficulties. Isn't that more filtration and cleaning up of the water? My question is, how far are you going to extend this? I'm concerned about the flooding, and I want to address that immediately.
And if it were left to me, I would say the flooding issue gets taken care of first, but I think this also gives us an opportunity to find a funding source for Grass Lake, which, yes, that's more a
in
filtration
the future.
thing. I think it probably would help to some extent on the flooding, but it's not the answer. But we're going to ask staff to come up with a plan. I don't know how we necessarily integrate that with what your motions are going to be tonight.
Well,
I think it will be a long-term, long-range plan as to what we may want to do to really get this resolved once and for all.
Other comments? Mr. Dockin?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I want to follow up on Doug's question about Grass Lake. Is it your opinion, Mr. Odens, that Grass Lake would alleviate localized flooding?
Councilman Dockin, localized flooding in certain parts of the town may be helped, but not in, in the western or northern part of the city.
Is it your opinion that every drop of water that falls on the city of Willmar proper is the water that we deal with? In other words, we're not getting any other flow of water from north, south, east, or west, are we?
Not of any, no, I'd say no.
So we are looking at really developing some basins somewhere where we can divert some of that localized flooding then, right? So would that not be more appropriate at this time to... Has Bar Engineering ever said anything about developing some basin somewhere to handle this excess water that we get?
I think the solution that they've talked about in the early reports and the one that was in draft form as late as last year was the best solution appeared to be detention. Pipe capacity will give you some help, but nothing like off-site, off-street detention.
So the best solution was what again? I didn't hear.
The best solution would be some form of detention.
So a basin somewhere that it can be directed to.
That's correct. And then whatever the level of service the city wants to accept for localized street flooding, because I don't think you can eliminate that completely no matter how many basins you have.
Okay, thank you.
Other comments? Councilmember DeBleek?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to have the engineering staff take a lot closer look at, what you're talking about with localized flooding and, pipe capacity, you say, would not really improve the situation in some of these areas where you're seeing localized flooding. So therefore, you're saying that maybe retention at the head end of the pipe before it goes down and flows in the grass lake or is used at farther downstream. But first of all, I think we need to have what Councilman Anderson is proposing, financing for these types of projects that we're talking about. We can't do anything without the money to do it with. So the first thing is we've got to have some financing there to be able to develop a project and develop the scope of that project. So
I agree.
I think we need to listen to Councilman Anderson's proposal and what he has going to propose for financing and levying for the next year.
Councilmember Gardner?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I want to thank Councilmember Anderson for coming up with this plan. I think it's solid. I think it's wise, and I want to address very briefly this issue of stormwater detention. There are, Mr. Becker asked earlier, what is the answer? And I don't know that there is just one answer, and I don't know that there are any that are really, really good. I think there are a lot of small answers that taken together might help, but I'm going to be extremely interested in the discussion that we have that follows regarding potentially buying out some of these properties. I think that we're going to have to look at that. I think that might be one of the things that Councilmember Anderson might be envisioning that this could be used for, but it's something that staff can look at. For these folks, this is their collapsed bridge in their backyard, and we can't ignore it. And I don't want to suggest that we have. I just don't think that the answers have been very easy to come up with. But it's time that we invest in finding some of those answers. I think it's time that we invest in finding some of the other answers to some of the other issues that face us. And like I've said earlier, nobody likes proposing raising taxes. But this is necessary, and it's incumbent upon elected officials to do the things that are necessary. And I fully support the motion that will be forthcoming.
Councilmember Reese.
And there's two things that you want to address from what I understand, and that's the stormwater flooding being able to fund that with the franchise fee. The other thing is raising the budget.
Raising the levy.
The levy. Would it be, for the sake of clarification of the franchise fee, going towards the alleviating flooding problems within the city, can we be that general in the motion? Those franchise fees go towards flood control? I don't know. I think it. Yeah.
We're going to ask staff for a detailed report. What they would propose, what it will cost, how many years this is going to run to get this all done. And I don't know, and I'm not going to say I think this makes sense and that makes sense. I don't know. I just want to be able to have the money there. And then we have to rely on staff and the Public Works Safety Committee to say this makes sense or it doesn't make sense.
My comment is that we have to look at the financing here, because this impacts every property owner in the city of Willmar, every business in the city of Willmar. If what you're saying is to put on another $250,000 onto the levy increase, we've already increased it my proposal is to increase it $326,000. You add on another $250,000 onto that, what you're looking at is somewhere in the range of a 20% increase in the city's portion of property taxes. Steve, am I in the ballpark on that?
Well, Mr. Mayor, just so we're clear about one thing, in your proposal, you're not proposing to increase property taxes 11.63%. You're proposing to increase the levy by 11.63%.
Thank you.
Which translates into less than a 1% increase generally on residential property taxes.
All right. So by adding on another $250,000 onto that levy increase, what percentage increase are we looking at then?
Something closer to just over 2%.
So a 2% increase on a $200,000 home.
It's
about $50.
And
Mayor, if you go to that list that you're maybe looking at, where it lists residential 100, 200, 300, with the increased $250,000, the $100,000 residential would go up to 2601, which is a 2.07% increase. And 5202, which is a 2.26% increase, and the $300,000 residential property is 7803, which is a 2.15% increase. And the commercial is a little bit less, in the neighborhood of 1.5%.
The mayor is right. The levy itself would probably be in the neighborhood of 20%, give or take.
And the city's portion of our property tax bill has been what percent of our entire property tax bill?
About 20%.
About 20% of our entire property tax bill. What I'm thinking is, we have to be able to explain this to all of our senior citizens, to all of our businesses, and to our residents. I think the people who live in these problem areas understand it very clearly. I doubt that they would oppose it. But what about everybody else in the city? Councilmember Christensen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As you will notice, we've all been talking about only the revenue side of things, raising taxes, adding a fee for natural gas. Why don't we discuss or talk about some of the expenses? All I've heard in your budget was that we cut the Southwest Initiative Fund out of it, taking $10,000 instead of giving that to them, using it in the city. What about other expenses? We, government in general, cities, county, state, federal, always seem to be addressing the revenue side of things. We're short of money. We're short of money. Let's look at the expense side someplace. I'm sure there's some places where we could cut. And do we not have a rainy day fund? That's not a pun. It's intended. I know we've got millions of dollars in funds that we could draw some money from to help these folks or to help our city streets. Since I've been in the council, and our funds have just mounted and mounted and mounted, and I couldn't give you the total that we have in all of our funds today, but there's money there to access. And some of it was put there for, quote, rainy day funds or an emergency or something necessary. I recall a few years ago the odor problem we had over in Pleasant View, the east side of town. We tried everything. We spent lots of money to appease those people. I think we put in our own biofilter. I forget what it cost us, $150,000? $250,000? And I think it got rid of the odor. Where'd we get that money?
Waste treatment plant reserve.
Okay, in the reserves. What other reserves do we have to use for some of these other emergencies that we have in town? I don't like the idea of raising property taxes. I have the same concerns the mayor has. It seems that the $250,000 increase, you could say that the fee from the natural gas is going toward the flooding victims, but actually it's raising the property taxes. I mean, they're both going to be there. I say we look at some of the expense side and see what else we can do here for finding money for this problem and other problems, and to keep our budget in line. Property taxes throughout Minnesota are they're high. They're high in Willmar. Now, we say that our levy is low. That's true, but our valuations are so high compared to other cities like Sunburg or Worthington or whatever. Their valuations don't seem to be as high as ours. Our levy can be low because our valuations are high, and when valuations are high, property taxes go up individually. I say we need to look at some of the expense side of it here, right? At least look at it.
Councilmember Anderson?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You know, I don't disagree at all with Councilmember Christensen, but I think what we have to remember, the task before us tonight is to set the levy. And we haven't gotten the budget yet, and perhaps there are places that we can cut and reduce that levy. We can't increase the levy, but we can always reduce it. And I just want to make sure that we have some ability to work on some of these problems. And if we can find $250,000 a year ongoing until this is taken care of, then that's certainly what we should do. But I want to be cautious, and believe me, it's not something that I like to say that we want to increase taxes. It's kind of a tough pill to swallow, but I think we have to be realistic when we're talking about this.
Councilmember Gardner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to go back to the table in our packet that talks about the projected impact of your proposal on a $300,000 home, which was going to be $15.45. That would be the city's impact on a $300,000 property. The additional $250,000 is probably going to increase that, what, another $12? About $2 and change a month on property taxes for a $300,000 home to do things for the common good in our city. Now, I too am not opposed to looking at the expense side. I suspect that the mayor and staff have given us a budget that is pretty much status quo already. I don't know that there is going to be much that we're going to find there, but we can certainly try. I also understand the natural desire to keep property taxes low, but, you know, doggone it, there's folks that think that you should just take government and shrink it until you can drown it in a bathtub, and I think in this case, some folks sometimes look to drown it in somebody's foundation, in somebody's basement. And I don't think that we as a city and we as common citizens bonded together in this city for a common purpose are going to balk at one latte less a month on a $300,000 home to do something to help out what really is a city problem. If we can't do this in this neighborhood, what are we going to do the next problem that comes up? Are we just going to say we can't find the money, or is it that we can't find the will?
I'd like to remind the council that we've heard tonight from two sections of the city, 10th and Candy Ojai, which is the most prominent problem, but we've also heard from 3rd and Robbins, and I could probably list another 3 or 4 other spots in the city. Downtown, you know, there are several businesses downtown that got flooded out. And so, you know, as we try to address these problems, you know, for the person who's been a victim, it's a terrible problem. But there have been, you know, victims all over town. And it's unfortunate, you know, not to minimize it, but, you know, I remember when Ole Reynolds was the mayor of the city, he said that Willmar Avenue was the southern boundary and everything south of Willmar Avenue was a duck slope. Now, I don't know, I wasn't here in those years, but, you know, Willmar has a very high water table. That's one of our inherent problems. You know, somebody said, what's the original reason? Well, I don't know, but we have a very, very high water table in certain parts of the city. And so we will always have some chronic problems here. So as we try to address these problems and as we try to figure out where to spend the money, there's going to be more spots than just what we've heard tonight. And there'll be more voices coming forward saying, you know, my area has problems too. Mm-hmm. So we need to be mindful of that. All right, we've had good discussion. I'm going to try and pull this together. Dennis, did you ever make a motion?
No,
here?
I didn't.
Want to make a motion
I sure
now?
do.
All right, go ahead.
But
Mr.
my
Mayor,
question-
I'm sorry. Before Mr. Anderson makes his motion, technically, all that needs to be done tonight is to consider a resolution certifying a preliminary levy to the county. I know that you had talked about doing some other things about developing these plans, and that's something that I think would logically follow the budgeting process. The other thing that you need to consider, if you are indeed interested in doing the franchise fee, that at some point will require an ordinance. So, you know, it wouldn't necessarily be a part of this motion, but rather it would be introduced at a later date by way of an ordinance setting the fee. So I understand your notes here, but I'm just trying to point out that technically tonight, setting the levy is what's required. And these, in fact, some of your ideas for developing these stormwater plans will likely come about as a result of the discussion in Public Works or at some later date.
I hear what you're saying, but I want to be clear, you know, that how I propose the franchise fee to work, that it will have an end unless the council, you know, moves it forward to another project.
Then you might consider a separate motion beyond the resolution certifying the levy.
Yeah, I happen to have one that's about 5 points long.
Let's take care of the levy first. As I understand it, the levy that I'm proposing is $3,133,646. you want to add 250,000 to that?
So the levy then would be, Mr. Mayor, 3,383,646.
That's what you want to certify to Candioi County?
That is correct.
We can't go above it, we can reduce it.
We can reduce it.
Is that your motion then?
We have to include the HRA levy in the same resolution. I
Yeah,
suspect.
the motion is to introduce a resolution certifying the city's levy at, if, in your case, 3.3 some $million, and the Housing and Redevelopment Authority's levy of 141,000, whatever that number is.
141,796.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, is that your motion?
I'll introduce that resolution, or that motion
For the resolution.
for the resolution.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and we have a second that the city is sending to the county a tax levy, preliminary tax levy of, what, do you have the exact number?
3,383,646.
Say that again?
$3,383,646.
646. And also the preliminary tax levy for HRA at $141,796.
Right.
That's your motion.
That's correct.
All right, is there a second to that? Cindy, are you second?
I did.
Doug seconded it? All right, is there more discussion about that? Councilmember Gardner?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just to remind everyone that this is the maximum that the city of Willmar could levy this year. It is possible during the process, to my understanding, that we could reduce that, but that this is the worst, if you will, that it could be.
Right. Any other comments? Roll call.
Councilmember Anderson.
Aye.
Swenson.
Aye.
Gardner.
Aye.
Dockin.
No.
Fagerly.
Aye.
DeBleek.
Aye.
Reese.
Aye.
Christensen.
No.
6 ayes, 2 nays.
The resolution passes. It'll be sent to the county.
All right. I would further like to make a motion to kind of clarify some of these things, and I've got it written down here, but my motion will be, 1, franchise fee to be deducted, or to be dedicated to the stormwater and flood control remedies. Grass Lake is to be included in that scenario. 2, direct staff to develop alternatives and a plan to address the above-mentioned concerns. It is anticipated that this will be a multi-year plan. 3, after the stormwater flooding project is completed, City Council will either identify another citywide project, or if there are none identified, sunset the fee. 4, increase the 2008 proposed levy by $250,000. And 5, if some LGA is restored for 2008, reduce the levy by the additional LGA funding up to a maximum of $250,000. That's my motion.
What is your, that's your motion, okay? Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
And we have a second. What's the definition of the flooding problem? What's your intent here?
Well, my intent is, and you made the point, and I know that we have problems in other areas of the city where we have water problems, stormwater problems, where we can't get a reasonable amount of stormwater out of the streets. I think I would probably tend to agree with the engineer that we're never going to get it all out of the streets. I mean, the streets are going to hold some water, but it's where we have identified problems.
Okay, the identified problems is kind of a nebulous term because it depends who you talk to. I mean, we got 2 identified problems in the audience here tonight, but there are other people who aren't here that would certainly identify their area as a problem area.
I think staff probably knows of some of the areas. I mean, I know of an area where I had a car that got flooded one time, but, you know, there are areas in the city besides these that need some attention. If you want to amend it to make it more specific, I'd be open to that.
No, I just wanted to clarify what the concept of flooding problem is, because It depends who you listen to.
Right.
All right, is that clear enough for staff to wrestle with or not? You can wrestle with that? Any other comments? Mr. Dockin, Councilmember Dockin?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Dennis, why would you include Grass Lake when Mr. Odens has said that it won't have an impact on localized flooding?
Well, I think I've heard two different things, Councilmember Dockin. I think I heard that it would help it some. And secondly of all, it is a water-related issue that we have been wrestling with for many years. It seems like we might be coming to an end on that, and we're going to have to come up with some funding for it.
Is that, Mr. Odens, is that true, that it would impact on localized flooding, Grass Lake?
Mr. Dockin, the answer I gave earlier was that it would, I don't have the modeled effects on what it would do in Willmar, but in the southeastern part of town, it would have some help, but not in the northern or western parts of the town.
And finding basins would be more efficient. Retention ponds, detention ponds.
Yes.
All right. Councilmember Christensen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to hear the motion again.
Here it is. Would you like to read it?
It's your handwriting.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
would it be helpful if we requested the city clerk to reread that for us, please? I know it would help me.
All right. Ron, you want to pass it down as soon as you got it?
He has a copy,
Mr. Mayor.
Would you read it then, Kevin?
Motion by Anderson, seconded by Gardner. The franchise fee to be dedicated to stormwater and flood control remedies, Grass Lake being included. Point 2, to direct staff to develop alternatives to the stormwater and flood control remedies, and the plan to address all those could be multi-year plan. 3, that after the stormwater flooding project is completed, the City Council either identifies another citywide project or sunset that franchise fee. 4, to increase the 2008 proposed levy by $250,000, which technically we've done. And 5, if some LGA is restored by the legislature, to reduce the levy by this additional LGA funding up to that maximum of $250,000.
All right. Ron, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm wondering why we put that $250,000 increase in property taxes in there. Is there a reason that's there? Because we've already done it.
Yeah.
It still has to be in the motion, or?
When I did this, I thought that it would all be one motion. We could reasonably strike that since that's already happened.
Done.
And can I move to strike that?
Yes.
You already did.
You already did? Okay. Yes, I did.
Councilmember Reese.
The second point on staff alternatives, what effect does that have on the motion that would be coming from Public Works, Public Safety then? How do you see that?
I don't know what your recommendation is. I just quickly glanced at your minutes. And that may be a part of the overall solution. But yeah, I don't know what your recommendation is going to be.
Well, the recommendation is to look at areas where we can locate stormwater retention ponds, to contact the school district in regards to the same. The 4 different areas were Trot and the railroad to the north and west there, behind Quam and West Burgations. And then Garfield, Miller, and Kennedy. possibility of locating retention ponds at all 4 of those locations, plus looking at costs related to and possibilities of securing properties for locating a retention pond.
You know, maybe you've got the long-range plan already done. I remember reading it now that you mention it. I don't have a problem with your proceeding that way, but I would still like some additional detail from staff on other things that maybe we need to do longer term, whether it has to do with the size of the pipes or whatever the case might be.
I don't have a problem with the staff alternatives being in there. I was just wondering what that does to our actions that the committee has already is proposing to the council here tonight.
All right, Councilmember Fagerly.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can you tell me how this franchise fee works? So we just raised the levy, so property owners will be paying higher taxes, and then Mini-Gasco will be charging higher gas fee. So then property owners that do not use natural gas won't be paying that fee. So people that use LP, electric, fuel oil, and hot water heat. That's not fair.
I think that was some of the discussion that we had earlier. It's you know, you can talk about property taxes and how fair they are, and you have tax exempt, and you have a lot of other things. It's just one means to an end.
Councilmember, just a second, Doug. Anything else, Rick?
Well, like Ron said, we got reserves. Let's just take whatever we need out of there, probably up to $1 million, get the project done, and reimburse those funds over time.
Second.
Jeepers.
We got another motion on the table.
I know.
Otherwise, we can increase the utility replacement fee. I mean, we just increased it $1.50. It's up to $3, and everyone in the city uses that, so that's fair. Everyone, even the nonprofits, would be paying it that way. But you look at increasing gas, phone bills are going up, water, sewer is going up, county taxes going up, school districts going up. Sure, it sounds good that Mr. Gardner said, you know, a latte a month. That's just the city portion. When you're already paying $3,000, $4,000 in taxes, it's getting up there. So the franchise fees is not the way to go.
Councilmember Gardner and then Reese.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to go back to the discussion about the direction that staff is being asked to take. And I think that what Mr. Anderson is saying and what we're going to hear in Public Works, Public Safety are not exclusive of each other. I think they're probably complementary. At least that's how I see them. That's what I wanted to say in that regard.
Councilmember Reese.
Well, I probably don't even have to say it because Rick recognizes that, but when he brought up the fact about the franchise fee and not being fair to everybody, because not everybody uses natural gas in the city, but the charging of the franchise fee is for utilization of the right-of-way, is what it really is. Whereas LP or electrical, electrical is city-owned, and the LP, of course, you're not going to have utilization of right-of-way, so.
That's what the attorneys are telling you, why they can charge a franchise fee.
That's right.
Yeah. But the cable access, if you're on the satellite, you don't get a city council meeting here. So you do get something for a franchise fee.
Yeah, but they're using the right-of-way,
well,
too.
yeah, that's what they're trying to tell you. But you're just paying Peter to pay Paul or vice versa there.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilmember Swenson.
Why aren't we discussing reserves more? I mean, this is an emergency situation.
Well, it was discussed in one avenue, and that was if the council wants to put in quiet zones, there is no funding mechanism for that. That would draw on reserves. You know, we have a capital reserve fund for money that was not spent for capital improvements, and you know that it would probably drain that fund to put in one set of quiet zone crossings. So that it was talked about in that one dimension. Otherwise, what you're going to get into is tapping into reserve accounts that keep the city of Willmar stable and preserves our bond rating. You know, if we start reducing our reserves, that's why we have good bond ratings now. If those reserves go down too far, our bond ratings go down. And that impacts our borrowing power when we have street improvement projects or any other major project, the wastewater treatment plant, the hospital, whatever it is. When we have to borrow large amounts of money, we get pretty good rates because we have stable reserves.
Do we have some give?
Well, it's always a question, you know, how much give. You know, when we have more stable reserves than the state of Minnesota does. The state of Minnesota does not have good, stable reserves. And we don't want to operate like the state of Minnesota does at the legislature. They just kind of lurch from side to side with emergency funding and emergency packages. You know, do we have some give? We may. You know, it's a question of stability. You know, think of your own personal accounts. You know, hopefully we have savings accounts and we draw on them sometimes, and other times we try not to. You know, it preserves our own personal or family stability. So, yeah, the city has reserves, but we sit on them to maintain our bond ratings. The Finance Committee gets, you know, full reports of all that on an ongoing basis, all the different accounts, and you know, you can get full information through the Finance Committee, or if you want to sit down with our Finance Director, he'll explain everything to you, you know, to explain just where we're at. Any other discussion on the motion on the table?
Would you repeat the motion, please?
That's what Kevin read earlier, those 5 points, 4 points.
4 points.
Maybe 3.
It's the same motion.
Okay.
Do you still want it read, or are you okay?
No, that's fine.
Okay. Any other discussion? There's a motion, and it's been seconded, made by Mr. Anderson, seconded by Mr. Gardner. Kevin, this is a roll call. Okay?
No, Mr. Mayor, that would be a simple motion.
No, I want it to be a roll call.
Hey.
Roll call.
Councilmember Swenson.
Aye.
Gardner.
Aye.
Dockin.
No.
Fagerly.
No.
DeBleek.
Aye.
Reese.
Aye.
Christensen.
No.
Anderson.
Aye.
5 ayes, 3 nays.
The motion passes. Back to you, Dennis.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That concludes the work of the Finance Committee. Unless there's questions, I'd move to file these minutes.
Second.
There's a motion and a second to file these minutes. Comment? Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Next is number 12 on the agenda, Public Works Safety Committee report for August 28th. Councilmember Reese.
Well, Mr. Mayor, the first subject we had was stormwater.
Yeah, we did.
And these same people that were affected were at our meeting. And this was in regards to the August 20th, 21st rain event. And there were rainfall amounts within the city from 1.75 inches to 4.3 inches. And we had crews, public works crews out as early as 12:30 a.m. and the rain started around 11:30 p.m. There were several areas that flooded, mainly 10th Street and Candio High, 19th Avenue Southeast, 15th Street, and Richland Avenue Southwest, and areas along 3rd Street Southwest. There were other small areas that were impacted by the heavy rains also. And even though these people don't want to hear it, it was termed by an engineering term to be a 100-year event. That was a short 100 years from 2004 to 2007. but we have experienced two events within a very short period of time. And when we had the last event in 2004, as we discussed earlier, we had Bar Engineering do a hydraulic study, and that focused on 10th and Candio High. Through that study, it was suggested that the city look at holding the water back in areas of retention ponds, and 3 areas were suggested, which I mentioned earlier, and that was Miller Park, Garfield School, Kennedy School. The city, at that time, our staff approached the school district and the neighboring residents of Kennedy School, and they both voiced opposition to the proposal. After discussion, there was a motion, and I bring that motion to the council, that we direct staff to contact the school district once again to discuss the possibility of developing retention ponds at Garfield and Kennedy schools, explore other areas such as the railroad property near Trott Avenue and Highway 40, and our own Miller Park, and have staff prepare cost estimates for all those alternatives, including the purchase of several homes at 10th and Candio High, where an additional retention area could possibly be developed. Mr. Mayor, I would move the recommendation of the committee.
Second.
We have a motion and a second for all those conditions that were just read to you. Further comment about that? Councilmember DeBleek.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I seem to recall at the meeting we also talked about the possibility of encouragement of rain gardens.
Right.
And encouraging private residents to look at and encouraging them to develop rain gardens on private property. And I see no mention of that in this recommendation at all.
No, it wasn't in there, I guess. But yes, we did have the discussion.
Can that be added to the recommendation?
Just the encouragement of citizens to maintain rain gardens.
And staff
whenever.
to also look at the development of rain gardens.
So informing the public of what it takes to develop a rain garden, is that what you're saying?
That could be a portion of it, yes.
I don't have a problem with that, adding it to the motion that that the city look into what it takes for rain gardens and then inform the public. If, I don't know, remember who seconded it. Was it you, Jim?
Yeah. The question, Jim, is Bruce wants to include the encouragement of the use of rain gardens in this motion.
Okay.
Doug said it's okay with him. You made the second on it.
Okay.
You're okay with it? What's a rain garden? What is it? I don't know what it is.
It's actually a small retention pond on private property.
Private property.
Basically what it is.
You would take the...
Oh, moat. Okay.
No.
Put rock in the ground.
It's like a pond, right?
No.
Is that what it is?
No.
The pond that you don't see, it's below ground.
Yeah.
Be below ground.
You dig a big hole in the ground, you put in containers that hold water, add it with rocks, some filter cloth, gravel, permeable soil over the top of it. You run your gutters into it.
And then does it drain out the bottom, or what?
No, it
Seeps
holds
into
the
the ground.
water until it can drain away by itself or into the ground.
Okay. All right.
That's what they use around the lakes,
Lots of it.
impervious surface.
All right. I have a question for staff. It was brought up a couple times, the fact that flood insurance is not available. What's the issue with flood insurance? Mick, can you help us on that?
Well, I'll give it a shot, Mr. Mayor. Many years ago, back in 1977, I believe, the City Council received a copy of a map from the federal government delineating a flood area in the community, and it was generally around Willmar and Foot Lakes, the shoreline following the lakes. I don't recall how long ago the council considered that issue again, But when it came up, there was considerable opposition to designating or participating in that federal flood insurance program because no one that was impacted in the zone supported the idea. And the reason is simple. They were mandated to buy flood insurance, and living around Willmar and Foot Lake, they had never experienced any flooding problems. So yes, someone made a comment earlier tonight, the city could participate in the program, but you need to understand that if the council made that decision, those properties in the designated flood zone areas would be required to buy flood insurance. They don't have the option. What it does is it gives other people outside the designated areas an opportunity to purchase the insurance. Historically in Willmar, every time that issue has come up, the people impacted have been to the city council and said, no, we don't want you to do that. We don't want to be forced to have to buy the flood insurance. That's where it is.
But individuals like people who are here tonight cannot go out on their own and buy flood insurance?
Not without the designation. And I do recall us as a council taking a look at that. And Mick, I don't remember exactly either, but it was after I got on the council, and I believe it was, I'm going to guess, right around 1990 or 91, right in that area.
No, it wasn't so very long ago that, is it FEMA that provides us the map? FEMA provided the city with a map, and the county as well, delineating new flood zone areas, and it didn't take long looking at this map to see that they were basing this off a lot of wrong information, using the wrong elevations. And in fact, they had scheduled a public meeting out at the County Health and Human Service Building, and when both the city and the county contacted them with regard to the information they were providing, indicating that a lot of it was wrong, they canceled that public hearing. Was that just this year?
No, 2 years ago.
2 years ago. And sent it back to FEMA and the DNR, who were going to go back and recheck their elevations and recalculate their flood zone areas, and to date we have not heard the status of that project.
All right.
So the 77 map is the map that is used at this point for our participation in that program.
Warren, did you want to say something? I'll give you that up.
I spoke to the folks in Washington today.
Yes.
I spoke to the folks at Chicago, and I spoke to the folks at Minnesota DNR that are working on this project. They are currently waiting for information from the city in reference to updating that map. That's what I was told today. They also told me at Washington that the 1977 map has all of the lake, the creek leading out of the lake towards Highway 12 is designated as Zone A, flood control, or flood Zone A, which they told me that every property owner along that area is required by their mortgage companies to get flood insurance. It wasn't an option. Didn't have anything to do with whether or not the city wanted to be part of it or not. The fact that they were living there and the federal map had that lake listed as Zone A, they said their mortgage companies were required the property owner to acquire flood insurance. That's the only map that has any Zone A designations on it, is that creek and the lake out here. None of the other areas are.
Well, obviously, there's a difference of opinion here, and I'm not quite sure how to get that resolved. But if you'd be willing to share what you know, maybe in a phone call to.
Here's a sample ordinance of adopting the Minnesota flood insurance or flood program.
Where did you get that from?
That's right on the Minnesota DNR's website.
All right.
That's in charge of the managing the stormwater flood control project is
Okay. All right, thank you. All right, let's go back to the table here. We have a motion on the table, and it's been seconded to direct staff to do all of these things here about cost estimates and possible places for detention ponds. Any further comment? Councilmember Fagerly?
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Have you talked with the school yet, or you're waiting for
I have
this?
a meeting set up next week.
Okay. If they don't want to cooperate, how does eminent domain work against a public property and another public property or entity wants to do it? Any idea?
I don't know. I'd have to research that.
Rich, do you have any opinion? Okay, thanks.
All right, are you ready to vote then?
Yes.
Those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Go ahead, Doug.
Mr. Mayor, Ron's got a letter that, I don't know.
What is it?
It's concerning flooding. I should have had you read it into the minutes during the open forum, but it was laying between Doug and I failed to give it. It's another flooding person over in southwest Willmar. And I told him you'd read it into the minutes.
Go ahead, Doug, let me read this. Go ahead.
Go ahead with the rest of it?
Yeah, just take the next item.
All right. Well, the next item was a change order number 1 for Waterview Business Park street improvements. There's no monetary value connected with this change order, only changes in the completion date for the bituminous wearing course and extending that to June 15th, 2008, which was requested by Dunnick Development Incorporated, who is the developer. So, Mr. Mayor, I would introduce a resolution to approve change order number 1 and extend the bituminous wear course completion date.
Second.
There's a motion and a second to approve change order number 1 and extend the completion date for this project 0703. Further comment? Those in favor, or roll call?
Councilmember Gardner?
Aye.
Dockin?
Aye.
Fagerly?
Aye.
DeBleek?
Aye.
Reese?
Aye.
Christensen?
Aye.
Anderson?
Aye.
Swenson?
Aye.
8 ayes, 0 nays.
The resolution passes.
The third item is also another change order, and that's for underground utility work, again in the Waterview Business Park development. And the contract is with S.J. Lewis Construction, and that's for construction of underground utilities, and they're tying at the intersection of 28th Avenue Southeast, which requires additional curb and gutter and sidewalk sod and seed and paving to accommodate a larger area of construction. That change order is for $19,825 and can be funded from the project budget. So, Mr. Mayor, I would introduce a resolution to approve this change order number 2 and add it to the contract with S.J. Lewis Construction.
Second.
There's a motion and a second for a resolution to approve change order number 2 and add it to the contract with S.J. Lewis Construction. Further comment? Roll call?
Councilmember Dockin?
Aye.
Fagerly?
Aye.
DeBleek?
Aye.
Reese?
Aye.
Christensen?
Aye.
Anderson?
Aye.
Swenson?
Aye.
Gardner?
Aye.
8 ayes, 0 nays.
The resolution passes.
Next item was a final estimate for construction of sewer, water, and road items in the Valley Brook area, project 0602. This project came in under budget, and staff is recommending approval and final payment to Dunnick Brothers Incorporated. So, Mr. Mayor, I would approve the final estimate to Dunnick Brothers Incorporated for project 0602 in the amount of $37,399.85.
Second.
But we have a motion and a second for a resolution for to approve the final estimate to Dunnick Brothers for project 0602 in the amount of $37,399.85. Comment? Roll call?
Councilmember Fagerly?
Aye.
DeBleek?
Aye.
Reese?
Aye.
Christensen?
Aye.
Anderson?
Aye.
Swenson?
Aye.
Gardner?
Aye.
Dockin?
Aye.
8 ayes, 0 nays.
The resolution passes.
Next item was in regards to Bergquist Park, and if you're not familiar with Bergquist Park, it's directly across from West Central Steel's new offices. And it's a nature area. There's a proposal to place 2 weir devices in that park because there's been some serious erosion, and then also would help with sediment control. And one of those weir devices would be at the head of the sediment pond, the other one at the outfall to the lake. This project was initiated by the Lake Association, the DNR, the Soil and Water Conservation District, Hawk Creek Watershed District, and Candioi County Water Board. The city has been approached by each one of these entities to coordinate the project, and the estimated cost is $25,000. And the only contribution that we as the city have to make to the project is for staff time. So, Mr. Mayor, I would move to approve the Bergquist Park project as presented and authorize staff to proceed.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the Bergquist Park project and authorize staff to proceed with it. Comment? Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
That's the last item, Mr. Mayor, and unless there's questions, I move to file the minutes.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to file the minutes. Before you vote on that, I would like to read into the record this letter. Bob and Joyce Jacobson sent the letter to the city of Willmar. They live at 1443 Grace Avenue Southwest. It's in regard to city rainwater control. Recently, an article in the West Central Tribune indicated the city of Willmar was considering the construction of rainwater holding ponds in our area. Our property located between 14th and 15th Streets would be an ideal location. Our home, constructed in 1967, faces west on Grace Avenue. To our east was a low area that served as a holding pond. We did not have a water problem until the city allowed new property owners on 14th Street to fill the low area to a level of 3 feet over our elevation. Also, an elevation error was made on Grace Avenue as it connects with 15th Street. This error was by Mr. Carlson, the city engineer, allows 15th Street water to flow east on Grace Avenue. The 15th Street water flowing south does not reach the water takeaway system on Willmar Avenue. We registered our concern with Mr. Carlson. He came to our property for inspection. His suggestion was to place our backyard in concrete. Mr. Carlson did admit the water came from the city streets. He arranged with the Willmar Fire Department to pump the water back onto the street as the 8-inch takeaway pipes would not dispose of the water. Please consider our property. Develop and implement a plan whereby city street water does not overflow the Grace Avenue curb. Our taxable market value increased by $7,600 for 2007. We agree with this figure, providing the city solves its water problem on Grace Avenue Southwest. Signed, Bob and Joyce Jacobson. This is dated September 4th. I'll pass this over to the city clerk, and the city engineer can consider that. Thank you. The motion on the table is to approve the minutes. Those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Carried. We are now down to to miscellany. Mick, you got to help us here. We got 3 items.
2 items, Mr. Mayor. One was motion to set the public hearing for the budget, which is typically referred to as a truth and taxation hearing, for December 3rd, 2007. And if we need a continuation hearing, that be held on December 17th, 2007. You can do those in one motion.
So moved.
Second.
There's a motion and a second to have the Truth and Taxation meeting on December 3rd and a continuation, if needed, on December 17th. Comment? Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Mick?
Mr. Mayor and members of the council, we opened bids today for Project 0712, which is the Civic Center Drive trail improvements. The expansion of the sidewalk leading out to the Civic Center. We received 5 bids. And the low bid was that of Voss Plumbing and Heating out of Paynesville for $58,858.50. We've checked with some references, and we're recommending that the council adopt a resolution authorizing the mayor and myself to enter into an agreement with that company.
So moved.
Second.
There's a motion and a second to approve a contract with, called Voss?
Voss.
Voss Plumbing and
VOSS.
Heating. They're doing concrete work now, huh?
Yes.
Huh. Comment about that? Ron, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Have we done business with these people before in this
No, sir.
capacity, or?
Not on concrete, no.
But we know that.
But we know that they have in Fergus Falls, and they've done some work for Candioi County and Paynesville as well.
Because they're considerably lower than the balance of them, and well, I don't always agree with the lowest bidder doing the work.
You know, we were not surprised, but I mean, it
bargain
piqued our interest when we saw the spread between the low bidder and the next low bidder, and so we asked for some references and checked them out, and everything seems to be fine.
Any other comments? Is that a roll call?
It's a resolution, sir.
Okay,
yes.
roll call.
Councilmember DeBleek.
Aye.
Reese.
Aye.
Christensen.
Aye.
Anderson.
Aye.
Swenson.
Aye.
Gardner.
Aye.
Talken.
Aye.
Fagerly.
Aye.
8 ayes, 0 nays.
That resolution passes. Is that it, Mick?
Yes, sir.
Announcement of council committee meeting dates. Finance.
Mr. Mayor, Finance Committee is going to meet on Monday, the 10th, 5 o'clock in these chambers to get all the details of the mayor's budget.
All right. That presentation will probably be shorter than my comments tonight. Public Works, Public Safety.
Tuesday, the 11th, 4:45.
Okay, 4:45. Community Development.
We'll set a meeting for Thursday, September 13th, 4:45.
Labor.
Labor Committee, Mr. Mayor, will meet on Wednesday, the 12th at 4:45.
Okay. Any other announcements from council members? Staff, anything you want to announce here tonight? I just want to make a brief comment about the open house out at Midwest Technology. I know Cindy was out there. I think Bruce was there. Jim, were you out there? Anybody else? It was a wonderful event. That campus is really growing. In 18 months, they've got 7 businesses with 2 more shortly to locate, 178 employees on campus, and they're moving forward. It's very good to see. All right, anything else to come before the council tonight? If not, a motion to adjourn.
So move.
There's a motion and it's been seconded. We are adjourned.